This is Adam Graham from Pretty Much the Present, bringing you a week of old-time radio podcasts. These episodes were originally released back in 2011, and we're releasing them here pretty much as is, with only some extraneous bits such as the opening from all of the episodes after the first episode removed. Because these are old, it should be noted that any offers or promotions mentioned in the episode may not be valid unless they're currently mentioned on the Great Detectives website. Here now is a week of old-time radio detective podcast. Welcome to the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham. If you've got a comment, go ahead and send it to me. Box 13 at greatdetectives.net. Be sure to cast your vote for the show on Podcast Alley, podcastalley.greatdetectives.net. And become one of our friends on Facebook, facebook.com/Radio Detectives. Well, I hope everybody had a great Easter. Before we do get into today's adventure of the Abbotts, I do want to remind you, if you've not already, be sure to check out my wife and I's book, Tales of the Dim Night. It is available as both a paperback and an ebook. You can order it off of Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and you can learn more about it at dimnight.com. Let's get into today's adventure, The Clicking Silver Pen.
After all, if you've got to keep your husband from going back to an old flame, but you're not going to let anything like a double murder stand in the way, now, are you?
The National Broadcasting Company presents The Adventures of the Abbotts, starring Claudia Morgan and Mandel Kramer as Pat and Jean Abbott, those popular characters of detective fiction created by Francis Crane, whose current book is Death in Lilac Time. NBC invites you to join Pat and Jean each week at this time for another recorded adventure in romance and crime. Now here is Jean Abbott to set the stage for tonight's puzzle in murder.
Pat and I had been on a case in Pittsburgh. When it was over, having been brilliantly solved by my Pat, who's a tremendous detective, we had an invitation from an old school chum of Pat's, Josh Fielding, president of International Steel. Josh invited us to drop by and tour his steel plant. Pat and I stood beside Josh as he led us past the huge, boiling cauldrons of hot, liquid steel.
You make quite a mean kettle of soup in those cauldrons, Josh.
Yes, it's mean, all right, Pat. Some of it's up to 3,000 degrees. Now, if you look at that catwalk crossing over your head toward the cauldrons...
Oh, what a terrific view. Look at that catwalk. It's so far up. Look, Pat. Pat, that man up there.
Good heavens, he's falling.
He'll fall into that hot steel.
I'll never forget the sight of that man as he fell past the girders, his hands clutching helplessly at the air, his face twisted in unspeakable fear. I would have passed out if Pat hadn't grabbed me and carried me outside. Sometime later, when I'd calmed down, we were in Josh Fielding's office.
Of course, we'll skip the rest of the tour, Mrs. Abbott. I'm sorry you've been so upset.
Oh, I'll be all right now, Josh. You seem to have done much better than I did. You've really taken it in stride.
Unfortunately, these accidents in my plant occur quite frequently. I become used to them. Well, used to them as a man can be. It's all part of the human equation. If we can't write disaster off now and then, we'd all go mad, wouldn't we? I'm sorry, though, that it disturbed you, Mrs. Abbott. I was hoping you'd feel well enough to, take a quick look at our research lab.
Thank you, Josh, but I'd rather not.
Pat, you know who works in there? Laura Stewart.
Not the Laura Stewart. The belle of the old campus herself?
Exactly. She turned out to be a remarkable chemist. I put her in my lab last year.
Laura Stewart.
Mm-hmm.
Josh, you remember the night at college when Laura and I got accidentally locked in the gym?
I never thought that was an accident, Pat.
No, not if I know Pat it wasn't. Darling, you never told me about that.
Well,
He never told you about Laura Stewart. Why, he and Laura were locked in...
Did you ever see anybody else from the old gang,
It was
Josh?
the talk of the campus. She was a ravishing girl, and...
Go on.
Isn't it awfully hot in here?
Now, come on, Pat. Step into the research lab with me and say hello to Laura. She'll be so glad to see you.
I'd like to take a look at her myself.
Well, some other time, maybe.
Let's go, Mr. Fielding. Which way is it to the research lab? I've always been interested in research of various types.
I see. Well, it's right through that door down the hallway. Just follow me. Just a moment. Stand right here, please. That's the warning buzzer. It means that someone's coming out. We'll have to wait here a second. Let these men pass. Careful. Just stand back, please.
What are those men carrying?
Grams of radium.
What in the world? Well, what noise is that?
A Geiger counter.
Oh, well, I've never heard one. Detects radioactivity, doesn't it?
Yes, we have to be very careful. All right, fine. This way to the lab, please. There she is, Pat. Laura Stewart.
Why, Pat Abbott. Oh, darling.
Hello, Laura.
Where have you been all these years? Oh, you've got to give me a great big kiss for Auld Lang Syne. Just you come here to
Now,
Laura.
Laura, I'd like you to meet my wife, Jean.
I still haven't met anyone who sends me the way that Pat... Your wife?
How do you do, Miss Stewart? I'm always glad to meet an old friend of Pat.
Hello, Mrs. Abbott.
Why don't you show Pat and Jean around the lab, Laura?
Of course, Josh and I...
Laura, I don't believe I've had the pleasure of meeting Mr. and Mrs. Abbott.
Oh, yes, Pat and Mrs. Abbott. This is Mr. Jordan.
Hello.
How do you do?
Tim Jordan's head of my research lab, Pat.
Oh? That must be very exciting work, Mr. Jordan.
Oh, it is, Mr. Abbott. Especially here at Josh's plant, where he gives us free rein.
Josh, I'm going to be the first to wish you a happy birthday.
Thank you, Laura, dear. That's very sweet.
Oh, is it your birthday, Mr. Fielding?
Well, happy birthday, Josh.
Thanks. And if you two don't join the rest of us at my home for a party tonight, I'll never speak to you again.
We'd love to.
No, I'm not waiting for the party to give you my present either. I'm going to be the first to do that. Here.
Laura, what a beautiful fountain pen.
Why, it makes my present for Josh look sick.
Oh, don't be silly, Tim. It's nothing, really.
Laura, why don't you and Tim close up the lab and come over to my house right now with Pat and Jean? I'll mix my usual perfect cocktail.
Oh, no, I'm afraid I couldn't do that. I really couldn't. I have too much work to do. You run along. I'll meet you there later.
Are you sure?
Yes, absolutely. You go along with Pat and Mrs. Abbott, and I'm sorry, I can't go now.
All right, Laura, you don't have to get so upset about it, dear. Tim, how about you? You can come with us now, can't you?
I'm right behind you, Josh.
No, Tim.
What's the matter, Laura? You feel all right?
I feel quite all right. It's just that I have something here in the lab that I want you to look at, Tim. You can go with them later, can't you? You don't have to go now, do you?
Well, it isn't a matter of life and death.
And don't go now, Tim. Stay here. I've got to talk to you.
Well, all right, Laura. Just don't excite yourself this way.
I'm not excited.
Come on, Pat and Jean. We'll see these two later. Don't be late, Tim. You drag Laura out of this lab whether she wants to work or not. It's my birthday, and I won't stand for any nonsense. We'll be waiting for you at my home.
Bye, Pat and Miss Abbott.
So long, Laura. See you later.
So nice to have met you, Miss Stewart.
And bye, all. We won't be late.
Here's the door, Pat. One of you men open the safety door.
Well, your old flame may be a very glamorous-looking woman, Pat, but I'm afraid she's on the hysterical side.
Don't you know why?
Why? Got a theory?
Mm-hmm. It's because she saw me again.
Oh, you conceited.
Well, I always have that effect on her, darling. No Geiger counter this time, huh, John?
No, Pat. After all, as president of this company, I'm not going to steal from myself. We just take ordinary common sense precaution.
But ordinary precautions don't seem to work, Mr. Fielding.
Why do you say that?
Well, I was thinking of that man who fell from the catwalk and was killed.
Pat,
Yes, Laura?
we drank to Josh's birthday, so this time I'm drinking to you and me and certain memories.
To us, Laura. And I know which memories you mean, too.
Pat, you seem to be having a wonderful time.
Oh, yes, darling. Laura and I were just talking about research.
Oh, were you?
Come on, Pat, and Mrs. Abbott. I want you to meet Dean Kennedy.
Hello, Laura.
Dean Kennedy, this is Pat and Jean Abbott.
Oh, how do you do?
Hello.
Dean Kennedy is head of the little college here in town. Have you heard of the Independence Institute of Technology?
It's a formidable name, Mr. Abbott, but a very modest school.
Oh, excuse me, there's the birthday boy. I want to speak to him again. Josh!
Yes, Laura?
Would you do a favor for me? Could I have the fountain pen? Would you give it back to me?
Give it back to you.
It's really not the sort of present that I wanted to give you, and you've half a dozen pens already.
But I like it, Laura. I don't expect you to spend a lot of money on a fancy present.
Please, Josh, give me the pen. I want to get something else for you.
Don't be silly. You gave it to me, and it's all over.
It's a darn good-looking pen.
Well, of course. Forget it, Laura.
Will you please give me that pen?
No. Now skip it, won't you?
Josh, give me that pen.
Not on your life.
Josh, come back
Now,
here.
Laura, why are you so bothered about a silly old...
Oh, Josh, let go of me, Pat. Josh, just wait.
He had her chasing after Josh up those stairs as though she were playing cops and robbers. She's determined to get that pen back or know the reason why. Pat! He's falling downstairs! Pat!
Let me see him.
Call a doctor, someone.
What happened?
No! It was an accident. Is he all right? Is he all right?
He's dead.
I didn't know what I was doing. I was angry. I pushed him. I didn't realize that he was so close to the stairs. I didn't know. I didn't
All right, Laura, easy
know.
now. Easy. Look, I think Laura ought to rest for a while. She'll be all right if she's left alone.
Yes, you're right. We'll wait in the other room, Mr. Abbott. Come on, Tim.
All right, Dean.
I'll help you to that couch.
Had a girl, Jean. Now, if the rest of you will wait in the other room...
Come on, Martha.
I say she killed him deliberately.
Please, Martha. Let's go.
Certainly, Dean.
All right, let's just get her on that couch, Jean.
Laura, stand up. That's right. Now lean on me. That's it.
You've got to believe me. I didn't kill him. Mrs. Kennedy hates me, and that's why she said that.
Now, Laura, please, lie back. That's it.
I'll go into the dining room. I saw a bottle of vodka in there. I'll be right back, Jean. The phone is out in the hall, too. It's convenient.
For what?
I'm going to phone the police.
Oh, now, Laura, just try to control yourself. You won't help things acting this
I
way.
wouldn't hurt Josh.
No.
I just pushed him. I didn't know.
All right, Laura, all right. Now, suppose you just... Lights. Who turned them out? Pat! Pat, come here! Pat!
Dean, where the devil is that light switch?
Jean.
Oh, Pat. Oh, Pat, someone turned out the lights.
Where did you get that letter opener?
Oh, someone came into the room in the dark. I didn't know what was happening. I tried to grab them, and I reached out, and they shoved this letter opener in my hand.
Better put it down, Jean.
Yes,
It wouldn't help much if anyone saw you with that letter opener. Better look at Laura.
Laura, what? Oh, Pat, she's bleeding. Laura, what happened?
Pen. The pen.
Oh, no. Pat, is she...
Yes, Jim. She's been stabbed in the heart.
Oh, Pat, I touched that knife. My fingerprints are on that knife.
Steady, darling. I'd better do a little bit of clue hunting before we let anybody in here. Let's see here.
Oh.
Women have more junk in their pockets.
Pat, isn't that the top of the pen that Laura gave to Josh Fielding?
Yeah. Now, there are other fascinating little items in here.
Oh, what, for instance?
Some letters. From Dean Kennedy to Laura.
Oh, Dean Kennedy, that little man with the glasses. He's the most harmless, innocent. Good letters?
Mm-hmm. And you're not going to read them. I'm censoring them right now.
Let me see them now.
No, go away. These are not for little girls. Dean Kennedy, Mr. Jordan.
Is Laura dead?
Yes, I'm afraid so.
Oh, that's horrible. Horrible.
The police are on their way. They'll take over. By the way, the three of you were in the other room before this happened. Now tell me, did any one of you leave that room at all?
Well, I went out to get another drink in the next room.
I see. Dean Kennedy, I just wanted to ask you a question.
Yes, Mr. Abbott.
I found these letters in Laura's pocketbook. Were you going to buy them?
Me? Buy them?
You heard me.
All right, it is true. I did write those letters. I tried to cover up because... Well, I'm married. I've worked for 10 years to get my job as dean at Independence, and any gossip, whatever it was, could have cost me that job. But I don't care now. I can't cover up anymore. We're all involved in a terrible murder, and now I certainly don't give a hoot what becomes of me.
Well, Dean Kennedy, if I were you, I'd try not to be quite so talkative.
You think we might implicate ourselves? Well, we're in it up to our necks now anyway.
But I think we can save you a lot of embarrassment. Maybe even save your job.
Oh, how?
Go home. Right now. Everybody. You and Mr. Jordan, go home.
But, Pat, the police
That's
are...
just the point.
But the police will be here any second now.
And there's a chance, an outside chance, that we can wash this up without seeing all of your pictures smeared across page 1 of the local tabloid.
But if we leave, the police will think...
I've handled policemen, Mr. Jordan, for a number of years. Now, don't you worry about what the police will think. Just go home. While there's still time.
Well, you're a detective, Mr. Abbott. I'll take your word for it. I'll do anything you say.
So will I. I'll be at my home if you want me. You can depend on that.
And what Dean says goes for me, too. I'm available any time, Mr. Abbott.
Pat, are you going crazy?
Why, darling?
Well, you've got a double murder on your hands, and 3 suspects. Dean Kennedy, maybe his wife, and Tim Jordan, the research man. Do you question them? Do you hold them for the police? It looks as if we were in a picnic for the Campfire Girls, and everybody can go home.
I want them all at home, Jean. Each in his or her own home. And, speaking of the subject, you're going home, too.
Lloyd's will give you 100 to 1. You don't get me to go home.
Jean, go home.
Not on your life. With 2 murders to solve?
Darling, do you remember the time in Mexico City when I got mad and spanked the daylights out of you?
Call before you come home. I'll be waiting up for you. Very much upset, I went home. Pat swings quite a punch when he spanks. And the last time we had that kind of a session, I couldn't sit down for a week, so I went home. Meanwhile, as I learned later, Pat was traipsing around, of all places, in a car with a friendly policeman.
Well, I hope you know what the confounded bejeepers you're doing, Abbott.
I think so, Sergeant.
What'd you say this gadget was?
That's a Geiger counter, Sergeant. Really a simple gadget.
Yeah, it's a fine way to solve a murder, riding around all night with a silly box sticking out the window.
Well, this silly box, Sergeant, is one of the most important gadgets in the world. You see, it detects radiation. Now, if there's any radioactivity near this Geiger counter, it starts to click.
So what?
Well, it's an exercise in logic. Look, Sergeant, what's happened on this case? Josh Fielding, the man who got the fountain pen, was killed. Laura Stewart almost went mad trying to get the pen back. She finally got it. At least she got the top half of it. Then she was killed. Must be quite an extraordinary pen, huh, Sergeant?
Yeah, go on.
People wouldn't knock each other off for a pen, even if it did right underwater. Now, why did Laura refuse to leave the research lab with me and Josh after she gave him the pen? And why did she refuse to allow Tim Jordan, the head of the lab, to go out?
I don't see the connection.
There was a Geiger counter outside the lab, Sergeant. It clicked when we arrived. Obviously, because an employee came out of the lab with some radium.
Radium?
Mm-hmm. I even complimented the president of the outfit, Mr. Fielding, on his care in seeing that no employee got out of that lab without passing a Geiger counter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, radium is worth a fortune. Thousands of dollars a gram. Just the sort of thing you would conceal in a fountain pen if you were stealing it.
Oh, yeah, I get it now. Sure, this tomato Laura Stewart decides to get about $100,000 worth of radium out of the lab, so she sticks it in a fountain pen. Gives it to the president, knowing that they wouldn't turn that gadget on when the boss walked through the door. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see that, all right. Then she goes to the party and figures she'll get it back. She'll give him a fancier-looking birthday present, and she'll keep the radium. They have a battle. She shoves him down the stairs.
And I find the top of the pen in her pocket.
Yeah, meaning somebody's got the bottom half with a fortune in radium inside. Dean Kennedy, Mrs. Kennedy, or that Tim Jordan.
And that, Sergeant, is why we are taking this delightfully cool evening ride in the car with a Geiger counter. It can spot radium in a mile area.
Mm.
So we're going to pass the home of each suspect, and when the counter starts to click...
That's where the radium is. I get it. That's the killer. Well, now that I've figured out the whole case, what are we waiting for?
Yes, Sergeant. Now that you figured it all out, what are we waiting for?
Well, that's Tim Jordan's house right ahead of us, Abbott. He's the head of the research lab.
All right, Sergeant. I'll turn on the Geiger counter. Okay, it's on. Now stop the car.
All right.
If the counter starts to click, he's our man.
Okay, listen closely, Abbott. Anything yet?
Nope. Drive on.
All right, there's Dean Kennedy's house. Listen closely now, Abbott.
Nothing doing.
No, I don't hear anything. All right, it's the Dean's wife, then.
Maybe, Sergeant. Maybe.
Or who else could it be? Here's her house. Dean's wife lives over there. You got that Geiger counter on?
Yes, it's quiet.
It sure is.
Wrong again.
I don't understand it. It's got to be one of the three.
Sergeant, drive me home. Must be something wrong with the way I figured this out. But what the devil is it? Where did I go wrong?
Okay, Abbott. Home sweet home. Here you are. Hey, your wife's got the light on. I bet she's sore as a pup. You leaving her home while you work out the case.
Only I haven't worked it out, Sergeant. There's something wrong.
Hey, wait a minute. Holy Aunt Hannah, you hear what I hear?
Yes. The Geiger counter's clicking, but Sergeant...
Clicking, all right. That means the killer's in your house, Abbott. Don't tell me your wife took that radium.
Don't be ridiculous. Let's go in.
Hey, how do you like that gadget? Clicking like crazy. There's radium in that house of yours, Abbott.
There's a killer in there, too, with Jean.
Oh, Pat.
You got here just in time, Abbott. We were about to leave.
Well, if it ain't Mr. Jordan.
Sergeant, Pat. Oh, thank heavens you're here. It's Tim Jordan. He's the one who stabbed Laura.
I think your husband realized that, Mrs. Abbott.
Sergeant, you can turn off that Geiger counter. Now, look, Jordan.
Careful, Abbott. You're forgetting something.
You've got the other half of that pen, Jordan, with the radium in it.
That's just it. I have the radium with me in a needle that was inside the pen.
Oh,
so...
Oh,
my arm. You let go of my
Mr. Abbott,
arm.
if you or that policeman take one step toward me, I'll put this needle into your wife's arm. I suppose I don't have to be more specific about what would happen if radium is directly injected into Mrs. Abbott's arm. A very agonizing death, Mr. Abbott. Quite prolonged and unspeakably painful. And there'd be nothing medical science could do.
Why, you know...
I'm leaving now, Mr. Abbott. And I'm taking your wife with me, just to be sure my departure isn't interfered with. I'm taking her with me in my car. If there's any attempt to follow me, I'll be forced to use the radium needle.
You've got it all figured out very nicely, Mr. Jordan. You've had a good scheme ever since that man fell into the cauldron of hot steel. Was that an accident? Or was he wise to the fact that you were trying to steal radium from that lab of yours?
He overlooked a wrong conversation, let us say.
Yes, but it was Laura Stewart who finally gave you the real opportunity. She had access to the radium. You must have known radium was missing, so you went through the same logic as I did. When she made the fuss about the pen, you realized Laura had the radium in it, so you stabbed her and stole it. But you were afraid Jean had noticed you in the dark, so you came here to make sure.
I'm afraid I haven't any more time, Mr. Abbott. That is, we haven't. Your wife and I. My car's outside. Get moving, Mrs. Abbott.
Let go of my arm.
Let them go, Sergeant. Don't try anything.
Oh, but Abbott...
Let them go, I say.
Coming, Mrs. Abbott.
Tim Jordan gripped my arm with the radium needle about an inch from my wrist. The slightest movement, and he would have jabbed it deep into my veins. Pat, who'd usually fight like 10 Marines, stood grimly watching us go out the door. My Pat wouldn't take a chance, however good it was, on anything as dangerous as radium. When we got outside, Jordan took out the gun he'd been carrying and made me get into his car.
I'll drive down this road, Mrs. Abbott. Then we'll turn left and hit the highway. I must warn you, if we're followed by a police car, I shall kill you instantly. Don't move, Mrs. Abbott. I can see everything you see.
Mr. Jordan, all I want to do is powder my nose. That's a woman's privilege.
All right.
I don't see why you should worry about a girl's powdering her nose. I'll just...
My eyes! My eyes!
Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Jordan. I'll just take that gun of yours and... Look out! We're going off the
Jean? Jean, darling? Wake up, darling. Jean. You're in the hospital, darling.
Oh. Jordan. Tim Jordan. I blew the powder in his eyes.
Mm-hmm. It was very smart, sweetheart, but you should have waited until you were at the stoplight. You know, you knocked over a lamppost, an ice cream truck, and a fire hydrant.
Oh.
Of course, no one minds about the first two, but there's a little French poodle who's awfully sore at you for ruining his favorite hydrant.
Oh, what happened to Tim?
He's in the clinic. And your picture is in the paper with a very fancy headline.
Oh.
Daring girl captures radium killer. It's a nice picture, too.
Do I look pretty?
Fair.
Prettier than your old flame, Laura Stewart?
Maybe.
Dad, tell me the answer to the biggest mystery in this case.
The biggest mystery? What's that?
Oh, what happened when you and Laura were locked in the college gym all night?
Oh, darling, that was before you and I were married.
Well, I still want to know.
Did you see the gorgeous flowers I brought you?
Oh, stop stalling, darling. I hate people who stall about a question and change the subject.
Gene, what happened with you and that airline pilot when you got caught in the rain in that Paris hotel?
Say, they are beautiful flowers, aren't
Adventures of the Abbotts has come to you through the worldwide facilities of the United States Armed Forces Radio and Television Service.
Welcome back. Well, I had another one of those unsympathetic moments for Pat Abbott. And of course, at the end of the day, it's Gene who saves the day. Though my wife thought what she was doing was really, really risky and dangerous. But when you're being held hostage by a desperate criminal like that, they're probably going to kill you anyway. And so if you find some way where your chances of survival go up from 0, you go ahead and take it, plus a chance to catch the radium thief. Well, before we go today, we do have a couple quick comments on Podcast Alley. We're asking you in the month of April to let us know your favorite show. So far, we've only got 4 responses, but hopefully it'll pick up in this last week. One comment says, my favorite show is The Adventures of the Abbotts. I'm sorry to hear that you are almost running out of that series. Well, me too. This is actually a pretty fun series, I think. And it does have, even though it's got a few things that, even in 1955, are probably becoming less acceptable, it also had some really thrilling episodes. Just fantastic ones. And I'm hoping more episodes emerge. And I'm grateful for the Armed Forces Radio and Television Service that basically they syndicated these overseas, which is why we have access to them today. And hopefully someone will find some more of these episodes. There's 17 lost episodes of The Adventures of the Abbotts from this run, and of course an entire lost series of Adventures of the Abbotts with different stars from the 1940s. So we'll keep an eye out for it. And then a nice comment from J-Mac, a nice host, constant quality in sound and level of sound. Thank you so much. We'll be back tomorrow with Nero Wolfe. Before we get started today, I do want to remind you about Audible. Audible brings you a world of great audiobooks. So you can listen to Nero Wolfe, or you can check out one of the latest nonfiction bestsellers you've been meaning to follow. You can try Audible out for free and get a free audiobook by going to audibletrial.com/greatdetectives. That's audibletrial.com/greatdetectives. And be sure, another great reason to get Audible is the Colonial Theater in Boston is releasing some great new radio dramas with characters such as Perry Mason and Zorro, and you're able to get those at a discounted rate as an Audible member. We're going to get into today's episode of Nero Wolfe, The Case of the Telltale Ribbon.
Ladies and gentlemen, the ringing of that phone bell brings you mystery, adventure.
Nero Wolfe's office, Archie Goodwin speaking. What? Who? Who is this? Who wants to speak to Mr. Wolfe?
Nobody.
Nobody?
I said that. Hang up. It's late and it's too cold. And even if it weren't, I would not consider for one moment moving from this room.
Please, Mr. Wolfe, I can't hear a thing this old gentleman's saying.
Does it matter? You heard what I said? No.
Now, what did you say? You were late because she was killed. Who was killed? I can't hear you.
What is it about, Archie?
He says he was due here an hour ago, but she was killed.
Who was killed? What does he want?
Do you want us to solve the crime? I say, do you want us to find out who killed her? Oh. He says he knows who did it, but he has an important message for you. Well, then come right over. We'll be waiting, Mr. Jenkins.
Archie, why do you insist on taking every silly little case?
Because, boss, we need to recover for March 15th.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's that renowned genius who is the bulkiest, balkiest, most ponderous, and most brilliant detective in the world. Yes, none other than that chairborne mass of unpredictable intellect, Nero Wolfe. Created by Rex Stout and brought to you in a new series of adventures over this NBC network in the person of Mr. Sidney Greenstreet.
This case I like to refer to as the case of the telltale ribbon. Perhaps a better title would be Wolfe Goes A-Hunting. For in a way, this was one of those unusual instances in which my boss, of his own free will and without any coercion, actually decided to leave the house and go to the scene of the crime. It started when the strange old gentleman who phoned us finally arrived. Well, there's our client, Mr. Wolfe.
Evening. It's me.
Who's me?
Oh, I just phoned you. I'm Jenkins. I got a dispatch for Nero Wolfe.
Oh, you're Jenkins. Well, come in. Mr. Wolfe, this is Mr. Jenkins. Says he has a dispatch for you.
Yep. Yeah. Are you Wolfe?
I am. Where is the dispatch from?
Don't know.
You don't know? How come?
Oh, I know, but I'm supposed to say I don't. See? That's my job.
What is?
Just to say I don't know.
What about the murder?
Yeah, who was killed?
Oh, my goodness. It was a terrible thing. We were just crossing the turnpike, and this fella come at us out of nowhere.
The killer?
Yeah. Must have been drunk, I guess.
Well, how did it happen? Did he shoot her, stab her?
Oh, no. He ran into her with his car. And she was only 9 years old.
Your granddaughter?
No, it was Bessie. But the police got him. I have to appear, I guess. Probably get 90 days, he will.
For murder?
Murder? Was somebody murdered? I must have missed something.
Look, we're talking about Bessie, and what do you want us to do about it?
Nothing. Bessie's my old horse.
Oh, no.
But say, who was it that was murdered?
Nobody yet. Good night, Mr. Jenkins. I thought you said it was important.
It might be. At least that's the way I was told.
What might be?
This here letter I was bringing to you. This dispatch. Well, gotta get along now. Goodbye.
Well, get him. What a pixie.
What is in the envelope?
Mr. Wolfe, look. 5 $100 bills. And the note says, Mr. Wolfe, your services are desperately needed. Come up this weekend as my guest. Signed E. Malott.
Edward Malott, the wealthy manufacturer.
Well, looks as though you're going out this weekend.
Well, Archie, pay my respects to Mr. Malott, and I hope you enjoy the weekend. Good night.
Something certainly phony about this. There's no party going on here tonight.
Yes? What is it?
Is this the Malott place?
It is. What do you want?
My name's Goodwin. I'm a guest of Mr. Malott's.
A guest?
Yes, he invited me down for the weekend.
Weekend? Oh. Well, you better step in, please, Mr. Goodwin.
Quite a bolt you've got on that door.
Yes, isn't it? Just sit down there, please. I'll get Mr. Malott. He's in the library. Oh, here he is. This is Mr. Goodwin, sir. Says he's come down for the weekend.
Mr. Goodwin? Good evening. You've come for the weekend, you say?
Well, yes, wasn't that the idea, Mr. Malott?
Well, I don't understand, Mr. Goodwin.
Didn't you send me this note asking me to come here?
Note? I did not. Oh, well, this is my personal note stationery, but I don't recall sending this. I didn't even type it. And I'm in the habit of signing my name with a pen, not with a typewriter. E. Malott.
You're certainly Edward Malott.
Yes. Services are desperately needed. What does this mean? What services? Who are you, Mr. Goodwin?
Are you serious? I'm a private investigator. I'm Nero Wolfe's assistant.
Oh, indeed. Nero Wolfe, eh? I know of him, yes, indeed.
And you really don't know anything about this note?
I do not.
Are you having a weekend party here?
I most certainly am not.
Then who sent this? And there were 5 $100 bills as a retainer.
I haven't the slightest idea. Oh, Dorothy?
Yes?
Will you step in here, please? Miss Davis is my private secretary. She may know something about this.
Yes, Mr. Malott. What is it?
Dorothy.
Oh.
Dorothy, this is Mr. Goodwin.
How do you do, Mr. Goodwin?
Well, how do you do, Miss Davis?
Yes. Well, Mr. Goodwin is assistant to Nero Wolfe.
You don't say. Nero Wolfe, the detective? Well, I've heard a great deal about him. And about you, too, Mr. Goodwin.
Well, now I'm mighty glad to hear you say that, Miss Davis.
Mr. Goodwin has a note here.
Is anything wrong, Edward? I heard voices. Oh, do we have company?
Nothing is wrong, Eva. I was calling Dorothy, that's all. Oh, this is Mr. Goodwin, Eva. My wife, Mr. Goodwin.
How do you do, Mrs. Malott?
Mr. Goodwin, yes. How do you do?
Now, as I was about to say, Dorothy, Mr. Goodwin...
What's going on?
Mr. Goodwin, this is my son, Larry.
Good evening. What's wrong?
Mr. Goodwin has been invited here for the weekend. He has an invitation supposedly written by me. At least it's on my stationery. Look at this, Dorothy. Know anything about this note?
No. I certainly didn't write it.
But it's my personal notepaper, and my signature is typewritten. I'd never do that.
Well, somebody sent it. Who's Jenkins?
Jenkins? Never heard of him.
A little dried-up old man. He delivered it to us. Yeah, maybe it didn't even come from this house.
I'm positive that it didn't. Never heard of Jenkins.
You have a typewriter here, of course.
Yes?
I'd like to see it.
Certainly, Mr. Goodwin, in the library.
How far have you come, Mr. Goodwin?
From New York, Manhattan.
Oh, and it's such a dreadful night, too.
Yes, and it is rather late.
Late? It's only 7:30.
Why not stay here for the night? Plenty of room?
Yes, Mr. Goodwin, plenty of room.
Well, I don't really think that's necessary. On the other hand, it would be a tough drive back to the city in this storm. I'll accept your hospitality, Mr. Malott.
Very good. Oh, Jeffries, show Mr. Goodwin to the East Wing. And take care of his car.
Yes, sir.
Good night, Mr. Goodwin.
You mean you're all going to retire now? I haven't even had my dinner.
We retire very early here. But Jeffries will prepare anything you want. Good night.
Oh, dear, who moved that phone? Hello, Wolfe speaking.
Archie, boss. Well, I'm here at Malott's place, but there ain't no party.
What happened? Are you in the right house?
I'm afraid I am. They've all gone to bed. Weird bunch. His wife, who looks very sickly and I think wants to say something to me alone, and Larry the son, and Malott's secretary, Dorothy Davis. She has me bothered a bit.
How unusual, especially if she's pretty.
A beauty. But she seems to know all about me.
You'd better come home, Archie. I can see you're in no condition to handle this case properly. Give them the money back.
Oh, I forgot to tell you. They don't want me here. Malott didn't send the note. No one here knows anything about it, so we can keep the dough.
Interesting indeed. The circumstances would indicate that you should stay there and wait for it to happen.
For what to happen?
For whatever it is the fates have conspired to have happen there while your shining little ego is in the midst of it. Bye.
Who is it?
It's Archie Goodwin, Mrs. Malott.
Come in. Come in, please.
I saw you give me the eye when I was about to leave. I've been waiting till I felt sure they were all asleep. Now, what's up?
I wrote you that note. I sent for you.
How do I know that?
Old man Jenkins is a scissor and knife sharpener who happens along every month or so. They wouldn't know him. I put 5 $100 bills in the envelope.
Okay, why?
My life is in danger. I've been threatened. I received 3 notes through the mail. They were all postmarked in New York City.
Did I see them?
Here they are.
All typewritten.
The first one reads, "There is no love for you in Grey Gables." The second, "Why stay on in the face of death?"
And the third, "The time is shorter than you think." Do you think this is an inside job, Mrs. Malott?
Well, at first I didn't. But lately I've come to think it is.
What caused you to think that?
For some time I've been having severe spells. I thought it was indigestion. But then it occurred to me that I always broke out in cold perspiration. I was left horribly weak and terribly thirsty.
Thirsty? You fear you're being poisoned?
Yes. And since the thought came to me, I've been living in fear. Fear of every bite of food or drink. I had so shattered my nerves that I have to take these yellow sleeping capsules to even close my eyes.
Well, here's your husband and his secretary and your son, Larry.
Larry is my stepson.
Which one do you suspect?
The secretary, Dorothy, or my husband, or both.
What's the motive?
Well, they're in love. She's been here over 2 years, and they've spent most of their time together. The idea never occurred to me till last week. And when I watched them, it was quite obvious.
Anybody else know about these 3 notes?
Oh, no.
Then I'll keep them for a while. Good night, Mrs. Malott. And don't worry.
What are you doing, Mr. Goodwin, snooping around in Father's library?
Well, Larry, I was just trying to find out if this Remington was the machine you used to type those notes.
What? What notes?
The notes you sent your stepmother.
Why, I don't know anything about any notes.
Then why were you so startled?
I'm not startled. I just, why would I threaten her?
So you do know about them. I didn't mention the contents of the notes.
I just happened to see them on the table in her sitting room.
You don't care too much about your stepmother, do you?
Oh, she's all right.
You don't care too much about Dorothy either, do you?
I certainly don't.
Why not?
Well, I don't like her tactics, making a fool out of my father.
If anybody here sent those notes, she did.
You think Dorothy would have a motive?
I certainly do.
Of course you wouldn't have a motive, would you?
No.
Well, I'm inclined to think you would.
Well, just what motive would I have?
You don't seem to like any woman who's too close to your father. Maybe because you'd resent anyone sharing in the estate if your father died.
If I were you, Mr. Goodwin, I'd leave. Tonight. And the sooner the better. Good night.
Oh, Archie. Archie. Oh, confounded boy. Yes, Archie?
You have the wrong number. This is Sherlock Holmes speaking.
Why didn't you go to bed like the others? You don't have to push it. It'll happen.
Eva Malott thinks she's being slowly poisoned. Suspects her husband and his secretary.
He could be right. What are the symptoms she suffers?
Gastric disturbances, weakness, thirst.
Indeed. What about the son? Have any ideas?
He doesn't like his stepmother and is decidedly against his father's secretary, Dorothy. He knew all about the notes Mrs. Malott had received, saw them on her dressing table. He believes Dorothy's the culprit.
Then I should say that Dorothy should be the next on your list.
You can say that again.
Be careful, Archie. Use your head this time.
Incidentally, Larry advised me to leave the place tonight. Bit of a threat it was, too. What shall I do, Mr. Anthony?
Do nothing. The trouble will come to you. Bye.
Oh. Hello there, Mr. Malott. I thought you'd turned in for the night.
It's quite obvious you thought so, Mr. Goodwin. What are you doing in the library?
Why, just looking for something to read.
You'll find the books all around the walls, not on my desk.
Well, I was looking for a particular kind of book. I'm very much interested in poisons.
Poisons?
Yeah, a hobby of mine. You happen to have any books on toxicology?
I do not.
And what's that book on the fourth shelf right beside you?
Why, Where did that come from? Never saw it before. Perhaps it was in that assorted collection I bought a couple of weeks ago. I hadn't noticed it. Larry probably put them on the shelf.
Mr. Malott, how long have you known Dorothy, your secretary?
A little over 2 years.
Did it ever occur to you that she might be, well, infatuated, in love with you?
What? Well, of all the... Now, see here. I don't know what you're up to, and I don't know how you got hold of my stationery to write that fake note.
It isn't a fake note, Malott. I'm only trying to find out what's back of it.
Mr. Goodwin, there is nothing going on here that requires the services of a detective, and Dorothy is not in love with me.
I didn't say she was. I asked you if you thought she might be.
Well, since this conversation seems to concern me, I suppose I am at liberty to come in.
Oh, you're still up too, Miss Davis.
Did you hear what this man said, Dorothy?
Yes, I did, Mr. Malott. And I'd like to have a few words alone with Mr. Goodwin, if you don't mind. Mr. Goodwin, would you mind coming with me for a few minutes?
No, not at all.
And... well, it's rather late, Mr. Malott. Don't you think you should retire? It's a heavy day tomorrow.
Well, yes. Yes, I suppose I should.
And please, don't let this upset you. Mr. Goodwin has been misinformed. I'll straighten him out. Come on, Mr. Goodwin. The bar is right across the hall. I'll fix you a nice, soothing drink.
That'll be nice.
Well, now, what would you like, Mr. Goodwin?
In the way of drinks? Oh, well, some 7-Up.
Really? Just sit down over there.
Okay, what do you want to talk about?
Well, where did you get the idea that I was in love with Mr. Malott?
First, suppose you tell me if you are in love with him.
Yes, I am. But until a few minutes ago, he wasn't even aware of it. I worship him. And his work. I never wanted him to know because he's married. It would have caused trouble, and I'd have had to leave here. But now he knows it's true.
Well, now that he knows, what will happen?
I'm going to leave tonight. Now.
I see.
And since I don't own a car, Mr. Goodwin, I'm going to ask you to do me a very great favor. Will you run me into New York? I want to leave without a word. If I wait till morning, I'll have to explain to Mr. Malott, and... well, that would be most embarrassing, Archie.
Oh, now it's Archie.
You don't really mind, do you?
No, I guess I don't. I should, maybe, but...
Don't you like your drink?
What'd you put in this drink?
What do you mean?
What'd you dope it with?
Archie, why would I do that?
Might be several reasons.
There's nothing in that drink.
No? Then suppose you drink it.
Why? Give it to me. I'll throw it out. If you want another drink, fix it yourself. I'll have my things ready in 5 minutes. Are you going to take me?
Sure. Certainly I'm going to take you. But are you sure you have to go tonight?
I must go tonight. Now.
Wish I knew why. Mr. Wolfe's always so right.
What?
Just talking to myself.
Dorothy! Larry! Jeffries! Come upstairs.
What's happened?
Call Dr. Hauser. Something terrible has happened to Eva.
Well, Dr. Hauser?
Oh, poor Mrs. Millot. No, there's nothing to be done now. It's all over. Eva. You'd better lie down, Mr. Millot. I'll phone and take care of everything. I'll be here if you need me. I have to make out the certificate.
Yes, come along, Mr. Millot.
Just a minute. You too, Larry. I don't want to make this any more unpleasant for you, but, Doctor, just what are you going to put on the certificate as the cause of death?
Acute gastritis.
Is that what you've been treating her for?
Well, she's had several attacks lately. I'd warned her to be cautious of her diet.
And that was wise advice, too. Did you know about these attacks, Mr. Millot?
Yes, I did.
And you, Dorothy?
Yes, I knew.
And you knew also, Larry?
No, I knew she hadn't been feeling well.
How long had Mrs. Millot been suffering from insomnia?
Oh, a year at least. I prescribed Nemitol.
Yellow capsules?
Of course. I wrote a prescription every so often calling for 12 capsules.
You all knew about that, of course. I thought so. And would this be the prescription, this little box of capsules here on... Well,
What's the matter, Mr. Goodwin?
that box was open on this nightstand when we stepped into this room. All right, let's have the box, Mr. Millot. Thank you. Why'd you pick it up?
Because I didn't want the stigma of suicide on Eva's name, nor mine.
Suicide?
Yes. Eva had this prescription filled yesterday morning. The dose is 1 at bedtime, 12 capsules. She took 1 last night. I glanced at the open box when I came into the room, and there were only 8 capsules left. I knew instantly what had happened. She'd taken an overdose.
Doctor, do you think 3 capsules would be sufficient to cause her death?
I doubt it very much.
So do I. Mrs. Millot didn't die from an overdose of sleeping capsules. She was poisoned.
Poisoned? Are you crazy? By whom?
By you, or Dorothy, or Larry.
No, I didn't do it. I didn't write those notes.
What notes?
Mrs. Millot had received 3 notes threatening her life if she didn't leave this house. Each of you had a motive, so I'm sending this body to the coroner for an immediate autopsy.
I won't permit it.
The police will see to it. You have no choice.
Yes, Archie. What now? Do you know who did it?
How do you know anything's happened?
Let us call it extrasensory perception.
Well, Mrs. Millot was right. She's dead. Her doctor knew nothing about the spell she was having as being caused by anything but indigestion.
How about an autopsy?
It's all in the works. Looks like a metallic poison, all the symptoms.
Oh? Did you search the house carefully for such a poison?
I did. I'll check the drugstores in the morning.
Somebody in that house will purchase some poison. Let me know when the autopsy report is in.
Right.
Let's see now. We have Mr. Millot, Dorothy Davis, and Larry the son.
He's Mr. Millot's son, but not the child of Eva Millot, remember?
Yes. Is it true that Dorothy is in love with Millot?
Yeah. Dorothy admitted it to me, but claimed Millot wasn't aware of it until tonight. And earlier this evening, Dorothy tried her best to get me out of the house, insisted that I drive her into town. She tried to give me a drink, which I think might have contained knockout drops.
You don't say. Archie, I should have Fritz drive me up to the Millot place at once. Archie, are you there?
No, boss. I just fainted.
And that, Mr. Wolfe, is most of the story up to now.
Very interesting. Yes, indeed.
But it isn't true. I did not put anything in Mr. Goodwin's drink.
Then did you ask him to take you into town?
Yes.
And I might have been found in a ditch.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
Why did you try to get Mr. Goodwin to take you to town?
Because I felt it would be too embarrassing to remain until morning.
Maybe you'd already given Mother the big dose of poison and wanted Goodwin out before it was discovered.
Wait a minute.
Now, Mr. Millot, you claim that you knew nothing about Dorothy being in love with you. Should we believe that?
You can believe it or not.
Dorothy had a motive to get rid of Mrs. Millot. It seems that Mr. Millot had one, too.
And so did Larry.
What?
You admitted to me that you didn't like your stepmother.
And that you disliked Dorothy even more.
I didn't say that.
You said Dorothy was making a fool of your father. You resented the possibility of any woman sharing in the estate.
You knew about the sleeping capsules, and you could have put poison in some of them. You could have written those threat notes. And by getting rid of your stepmother and placing the blame on Dorothy, you'd be getting rid of them both.
But I didn't. I did not write those notes.
You were the only one who knew about them.
I was not the only one. I saw Dorothy coming out of Mother's room. It was this afternoon. Mother was out taking a sunbath. Dorothy did it. She's the one.
I think you're the one.
No, Dorothy wrote those notes.
That's a lie.
No, she probably slipped into Mother's room and wrote those notes on Mother's portable.
What? Hey, just a minute. Archie, come here.
I never heard of such
Well,
lies.
I didn't do it. You can't send me to jail. I'll kill you first.
Larry, drop that gun.
Don't come near me, any of you.
You're such a fool, Larry.
Give me that gun.
I'll shoot. I'll shoot.
Come on. There. Now, you better quiet down, kid. Or Inspector Kramer will take care of you when he arrives.
Well, Mr. Wolfe, what goes on here? Where's Goodwin?
I sent him upstairs, Inspector Kramer, upstairs to Mrs. Malotte's room to check on something. Here he is.
Yeah? What have you been doing, Goodwin?
This, Inspector, is the pièce de résistance. This is what Mr. Wolfe has been waiting for. This little black box contains a typewriter, a portable noiseless Remington.
Mrs. Malotte's typewriter.
What? I didn't even know she had a typewriter.
Larry knew she had one. And this is undoubtedly the very typewriter the threat notes were written on. All three of them.
You were right, boss.
Oh, I knew she had a typewriter, but I didn't write those notes.
Oh, shut up. Archie, how do you know the notes were written on this typewriter?
I've compared the type and the ribbon. They're both the same. These notes were written on this Remington.
It was Dorothy.
Larry, I don't believe a word you've been saying. Dorothy couldn't possibly be guilty of such a thing. If anyone is guilty, you yourself certainly have all the earmarks.
Everybody's against me, even my own father. But I'm innocent, I tell you.
Let me get it. I think I know who it is. Hello? Yeah, just a second. You better take it, boss.
Wolf. Oh, yes, go ahead. Let's have it. Yes? He's here, but he won't mind. Yes? I see. Uh-huh. You just finished? Oh. Good. Right. Bye.
Was it the coroner?
The coroner, reporting that poison was found in the sleeping capsules.
And the body. Did they find poison?
They did.
You were right again, boss.
I'm going up to Mrs. Malotte's room for a while. I want you to come along with me. Find anything yet, Archie?
No, mostly bills and invitations to bridge parties and so on.
Ah.
You find something, boss?
Yes and no. This pocketbook detective story.
What about it?
I'm just flipping through the pages, and I find this corner turned down. Well.
What is it?
Look and read.
Why stay on in the face of death?
Interesting.
The very words used in one of the notes.
Give me the book. Of course, this doesn't prove a thing either, but it does confirm what I was... Oh.
What now?
This cinches it. Get them all up here, Archie. Tell Kramer to bring them all to the bedroom.
Well, Mr. Wolfe, what now?
As you all know, Mrs. Malotte was poisoned by someone who had an opportunity to put it in the sleeping capsules. Someone in this household.
Yeah, but which one? The kid?
I never bought any poison in my life.
Be quiet, will you?
No, Inspector, it wasn't Larry.
And I suppose you think I put the rest of that rat poison in your drink, Mr. Goodwin.
No, Dorothy, it wasn't you. But how did you know it was rat poison?
I didn't. I just guessed. I can think, too.
Then if it wasn't Dorothy or Larry, you must mean me.
No, Mr. Lott?
No, wait a minute. It had to be somebody.
Yes. This is going to be painful for you, Mr. Malotte.
Well, you mean that Mrs. Malotte did commit suicide?
It was more than suicide. It was suicide with an attempt to have both you and Dorothy convicted of murder.
She planted things?
She did?
I can't believe it.
Show him the pocketbook, mystery.
Here's the proof.
Some of the threat notes were lifted bodily from this novel. But look on the back cover. Isn't that Mrs. Malotte's handwriting?
Yes, and this is the other note, the one to you, Mr. Wolfe, composed in pencil before she typed it out on her machine.
Then, Wolfe, the note you received was the same typing as the threat notes.
See for yourself, Inspector.
Then why the dickens didn't Archie compare them right away?
Just one of those things, Inspector. There are times when even a good detective is a bit on the, shall we say, dull side. Don't you find it often true, Inspector?
Nice of you to go all the way out there, boss. I was a bit stuck.
Quite all right, Archie.
Yeah, there's something that still bothers me.
So?
How can such a sweet, motherly type as Mrs. Malott cook up such gruesome ideas?
She was a very sick woman, mentally as well as physically. She probably felt she was going to die. And her warped mind seized on the opportunity to make sure that this Dorothy didn't get her man after she was dead.
And speaking of Dorothy, she's a mighty pretty...
Yeah. Some beer, please, Archie. If you were so certain that Dorothy wasn't guilty, what was the idea of spending so much time questioning her?
Huh? Why, I...
Never mind. The raised eyebrow department. Answer the question.
Well, there are certain rules a good detective always follows. Some are in the book, others aren't.
You mean there's nothing in the book which says a good detective shouldn't spend a few minutes with an attractive brunette, even though she is a murder suspect? The author of that book can be none other than the incomparable Archie Goodwin. Good night, Archie.
You have been listening to The New Adventures of Nero Wolfe, starring Sidney Greenstreet. Tonight's transcribed story by John Edison was based on the characters created by Rex Stout. This is an Edwin Fadiman production, produced and directed by J. Donald Wilson. In the cast were Harry Bartell as Archie Goodwin, and Gene Bates, Irene Winston, Ted Von Eltz, Jerry Hausner, Vic Rodman, and Bill Johnstone. Next week at this same time, Nero Wolfe and Archie will bring you the case of the shot in the dark. Don Stanley speaking. 3 chimes mean good times on NBC. There's music in the air tomorrow evening, music and fun, brought to you by Dennis Day, Judy Canova, and Grand Ole Opry. Charming and boyish Dennis gets himself tangled in another bewildering situation, while Judy Canova gets together with her comedy pals for some mountain-style goings-on. And Saturday also means a kilocycle trip to Nashville for Grand Ole Opry. Friday's fun includes Sam Spade and, of course, the magnificent Montague on NBC.
Welcome back. Well, I have to admit that I did kind of crack up at the Sherlock Holmes reference, obviously because of Harry Bartell's history on that particular program. It was kind of interesting to hear him referencing it on Nero Wolfe. Of course, this was another case with Wolfe leaving the house, but I won't go into that too much. And also the second time this season that the solution to the case has been that the supposed murder victim had actually committed suicide. And all of the other actors did a good job of portraying themselves as pretty suspicious characters. So it was a fun episode, even if it probably didn't require the great intellect of Nero Wolfe to solve it. Well, speaking of that, we turn to listener comments, and we have 2 comments so far in favor of Nero Wolfe as a favorite show. And of course, Nero Wolfe won, and we're listening to it as a result of your votes on Podcast Alley. I do have to mention, though, we are actually nearing the end of Nero Wolfe. After today, we have only 3 more episodes of Nero Wolfe. However, when we're done with Nero Wolfe, we'll get to hear Dick Powell in his role of Richard Rogue. So Rogue's Gallery is coming in 4 weeks. Be sure to listen for that. But that'll do it for now. We'll be back next Tuesday with another episode of Nero Wolfe. Join us tomorrow for Let George Do It. Well, before we do get started, I want to let you know, every week I write up an article either about a detective show or detective book, or about a golden age television or radio show or movie. And now you can get these articles delivered directly to your Kindle. You can just put Great Detectives of Old Time Radio in your search on Amazon, and you can try out service free for 14 days. Go to your Amazon Kindle and subscribe today. Well, we're going to get into today's episode of Let George Do It. No riders.
Personal notice, danger's my stock and trade. If the job's too tough for you to handle, you got a job for me, George Valentine. Write full details.
Standard of California, on behalf of independent Chevron gas stations and standard stations throughout the West, invites you to Let George Do It. No Riders, another adventure of George Valentine.
Mr. Valentine, there's a boy needs your help terribly. His name's Floyd Bronson, and he's in terrible trouble. He hasn't got any friends, and they won't let me see him. He'll still be here, I think, until the fire's over. It's a terrible fire. Please, please drive fast and get here. It's on Highway 41, just a few miles east of Paso Robles. You can find me because I'm a waitress at the Stop and Sip Cafe. Respectfully, Wanda Murphy.
Mudface, where's the coffee?
I'm fixing it as fast as I can. Oh, Mr. Valentine.
Hey, what's this?
I'm so tired. Everybody's tired.
Well, Wanda, can't you sit down?
Oh, I've been on alone since 6 last night. That's when he was here eating supper. Tommy Tucker, I mean. One that died.
The what?
He's a truck driver for a San Francisco fur company and...
Hey, Mudface, what's this about Tommy?
Oh,
ask one of the men down the counter, Mr. Evans. They know more than I do.
Oh, okay.
Salesman, that's all. Sore because Mabel's not here. She's good looking.
Yeah, we'll skip it. Now, look, Wanda, I know you're groggy, but in words of one syllable, what's it all about?
Yes, and you said something about a fire. We saw carloads of men on the highway. But...
Well, that's what I've been doing, feeding all those men. You see, Mr. Valentine, last night a truck went over the grade 11 or 12 miles east of here towards Bakersfield. Went out of control and the driver was killed.
Uh-huh. That's Tommy Tucker. And the fire was from the wreck, is that it? Truck caught the grass on fire?
Brush and scrub timber, yes. But they were afraid it would spread. They're only just now getting it out.
Okay, I follow you that far, only...
Hey, boy, what do you think of that old timid Tommy, huh, Mudface? Say, how long's he been on this run, anyway?
Oh, George, give me a nickel.
Yeah, here.
Did you hear me, Wanda? I said, how long's he been on this run, anyway?
Thanks, Rachel. That's much better. All right, Wanda. There was a wreck and fire. But you wanted us here for something else, didn't you? Something like a boy in terrible trouble?
Floyd Bronson.
Okay, let's hear it.
He's... well, I don't know what it is exactly, but... Well, I just met Floyd yesterday, Mr. Valentine.
Yeah, go on.
Well, he was just going through, but I had the afternoon off, and I was sitting here playing records when he stopped by. He sort of talked, and I talked, and I guess we talked nearly all afternoon. Salesmen and truck drivers don't pay much attention to him except to kid about the food. He was different.
He liked you, and you liked him.
Oh, yes, it's very mutual. I mean, well, he said he'd write to me. He hasn't got a family like I don't either. But he's expecting a very good job down in Bakersfield, and... Anyway.
Floyd isn't working now, huh?
No, but he's really expecting...
I meant yesterday he was going through hitchhiking, right?
Yes. He left here late in the afternoon with a farmer who said he'd take him the first few miles.
Hitchhiking on 41, going east, right?
Yes, sir.
The same way as the truck that was wrecked later on. What happened, Wanda?
Oh, I don't know. But the first we saw of anything was a highway patrol car coming back here. And inside was Floyd. And they locked him up in that auto court across the highway by the woods.
But if Floyd's under arrest, what's it for?
Well, he hasn't got any friends or anybody to help. I told you I don't know what.
All right, Wanda. I'll find out for myself. But in the meantime, do something, will you?
All right, sir. What is it, sir?
Well, I was going to say pour yourself a cup of your own coffee, but... Hey, look, after this, call me George, huh?
So,
Wanda asked you to help me, huh?
Yeah, the kid's upset. Worried silly about you.
Well, you know how it is.
No, I don't.
Well, she's a nice enough kid, I guess, but, well, you know, when a guy travels around like I do.
Oh, I see. Traveler, huh? Okay, what happened on the highway?
Well, nothing. I got a hitch from a farm 5 or 6 miles, and then, boy, nothing had picked me up. Not many cars on 41 at night, anyway. Guess I walked for hours until, well, there it was.
The wreck?
Sure. Burning like a house afire in the brush, too. I was just wondering where I could get help when...
Yeah, when a cop's car came along and you ran.
Oh, but just to get out of the way. They're coming fast and, well... Well, really, Mr. Valentine, that's what happened.
That's what happened. Well, Wanda was sure right about one thing, Floyd. If ever a guy needs help, you're it.
And, you're the man who owned the truck, huh, Mr. Jessup?
Yeah, lots of them. Look at this here. Silver foxes he was going to deliver to a store in Bakersfield. Couldn't tell them from parchment now.
Stuff's insured, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, but it's a headache. Know what happens to wholesale furriers like me? They get bald.
Sure not much left at the back of that truck.
And this crate of Persian lamb, shish kebab. And the box of chinchilla looks like burned cigar butts.
Okay, so you've had bad luck. But Mr. Chester...
Oh, Valentine, I'm not complaining just for fun. It's because I've been up all night driving to get her to see what could be saved. Well, the driver, Mr. Valentine, Tommy Tucker, nicest boy I ever had working for me. I liked him.
Yeah, I understand.
So, if there's anything funny about this, if it's not just a case of Tommy's clutch or brakes giving out on the grade, well, what about that kid they picked up?
You know as much as I do, or the police so far.
Mr. Justin, has anyone ever tried to rob one of your trucks? I mean, on such an out-of-the-way road, it could...
No, this is not a movie, Miss Brooks. Cargo's all boxed and locked and bolted to the floor. Besides, it's all still here, what's left of it. Still was curious about that kid, that's all.
So am I. He was running away from the wreck. And maybe he was in the wreck and doesn't want to admit it.
You mean maybe Tommy had picked him up?
Sure, why not? Little company late at night.
No, that doesn't make sense.
Why not?
Well, you see the sign? No riders. That's the one rule we're really tough about, and Tommy wasn't a boy to break rules.
Yeah, I heard a salesman call him Timid Tommy.
Oh, conscientious, that's all. Reliable. I told you, the best man I ever had. Best driver, too. That's what bothers me.
Yeah. Say, what did they find up here in the cab of the truck?
Ashes, mostly, see? His flashlight was here in the seat.
Uh-huh. Truck's out of gear, huh?
Yeah. I got a mechanic coming to take a look.
Little iron rings.
What's that? What do you mean?
2 little iron rings about an inch in diameter. On the shelf up here, back of the seat, see?
Yeah, I saw those, Miss Brooks, and for the life of me, I can't...
Fire's pretty well under control now, but I sent Tucker's body off to Paso Robles.
Oh, thanks, McGee.
2 facts bother me, Valentine.
Yeah?
Number 1, we couldn't find any jacket any place for the driver, Tucker. Not even a zipper.
But in the fire, it might have burned. And anyway, maybe he didn't have one. The cab of a truck is heated, isn't it?
Well, I know it doesn't mean much. But finding a wallet does.
A wallet?
That's right. A firefighter just phoned from several miles down the road. Says come take a look at something he picked up there. Tucker's wallet.
I said you're a liar, Floyd.
No, I'm not. I already told you.
It'll only take Mr. McGee a few minutes to get back here, Floyd. So if you expect us to help you,
But this is just an ordinary leather jacket, isn't it? You can buy them like this by the millions at Army Navy stores.
You can steal them off bodies, too.
No, I didn't. I told you I didn't.
I said steal them off bodies.
No, it wasn't even on him. It wasn't...
Oh, is that so?
Well, anyway, I didn't steal it. It was lying there on the ground, thrown from the cab like he was. And, well, I was cold, and I knew I'd have a long way to go for help, and well, so I took it.
This was when you just happened by the scene of an accident.
Well, sure.
And when you looked to see if the driver was dead, you looked in his pocket for his wallet.
It was in the jacket, Mr. Valentine. Honest, it was. I didn't realize it until after the cops had picked me up. And I knew I'd be in worse trouble, so when they weren't looking, I threw it out the window of their car.
That would explain how it was found down on the road.
Well, when you hitchhike, do you carry a rucksack?
What?
I know you haven't got one now, but you see these little iron rings? Well, they're what hold the straps of a rucksack. The rest of it was burned, I suppose. Inside the cab of the truck.
Well, Mr. Valentine...
Now, for the last time, will you tell me the truth?
Well, what really happened...
Never mind that phony preamble.
Well, all right. I was walking down the road, see, and nobody picked me up, and I was worn out, so finally I stood in the middle of the road. Then a sedan came along, didn't even see me. I had to dive for the ditch. It hurt my ankle, and I was still lying there when the flood truck came along.
And it stopped?
Sure. Driver thought I'd been hurt in an accident. He helped tape up my ankle. He did, here, see it? Only he was such a conscientious jerk, he wouldn't let me ride. Said if anybody was seen in his cab, he'd be fired. It was the rules. Well, I pretended I was sicker than I was, and he finally opened the back of the truck where I couldn't be seen. He said he'd dump me out before he got to Bakersfield.
Then what happened?
Well, I was so tired, I fell asleep, and next thing I knew, there'd been this accident. It broke the whole rear end. You saw how. Well, I was awful afraid for a second, and the fire was burning around me, and, well, you know all the rest.
Yeah. Now, even forgetting it's a wild story, what bothers me is, why didn't you say all this in the first place? It's like pulling teeth, isn't it?
Maybe we'll have to pull out a molar, Valentine.
Mr. McGee?
Yes, I've been out there listening. Some story, son.
Well, it's what really happened.
Is it? I just got a phone call, Valentine. Coroner in Paso Robles says Tommy Tucker was murdered.
What?
Hit over the head with a heavy instrument sometime before the accident. Instrument appears to be that flashlight we found. Your fingerprints are on it, Floyd.
We'll return to tonight's adventure of George Valentine in just a moment. Maybe you're counting on your favorite football team to do its very best this coming weekend. If you're driving to the game, I can tell you how to make sure your car does its very best. What the team does is up to the coach. What your car does depends on your choice of gasoline. Make it Chevron Supreme gasoline, for here's a premium quality gasoline that's climate-tailored. Tailored to the season and to each different altitude and temperature zone in the West. That means peak performance whenever you drive and wherever. Try a tank full of Chevron Supreme tomorrow. Right away, you'll notice the difference. Faster starts, smoother pickup in traffic, ping-free power on hills. In fact, you can't buy a better gasoline for today's high-compression engines. Get Chevron Supreme at standard stations and at independent Chevron gas stations where they say and mean, we take better care of your car. Now back to tonight's adventure of George Valentine. You go to a little roadside cafe on Highway 41, east of Paso Robles. You go to help a girl who wants you to help a boy. The girl is plain and lonely. But the boy is a little harder figure. Floyd Bronson was in the wreck of a truck last night, but it's like pulling teeth to get him to tell you about it. And if you're anything like George Valentine, you're never very satisfied with the teeth you extract. Which ones are real and which ones are false? Well, just now, Mr. McGee of the Sheriff's Office has said something which may shed a little light on the subject.
Good Samaritan stops to pick up a hitchhiker, then gets brained and robbed for his kindness. Afterwards, it's a good idea to wreck the vehicle, cover up the evidence.
I didn't do it.
Well, how about your fingerprints on that flashlight?
Well, I've been thinking about that. I guess I held the flashlight while he put the tape on my ankle, like I told you.
Huh. You always seem to have explanations after we tell you what we want explained.
Well, sometimes it's hard to remember, that's all.
Kid, you watch the world like a card player expecting a crooked deal. Well, don't you know how that makes you look? A Sharpie holding aces in his pocket.
Oh, everything I told you is the truth. You can't prove anything is a lie, can you?
No, Floyd, I'll say that for you. You don't trip yourself, but then neither does a lizard. Come on, Valentine. Let's go into town and see what else the coroner...
Wait a minute, Mr. McGee.
Why? I'll send a patrol car back for you.
But I just thought of something. I did. You know, well, it is hard to remember. I mean, what really happened.
This had better be good.
Well, like I told you, I was asleep in the back of the truck, remember? Well, I think I heard voices.
Voices? Where?
Well, we'd gone over a bump, or maybe we'd stopped. Yeah, that's it. And then, riding along, I heard the driver talking to somebody with him in the cab.
Hey, wait a minute. How did you know it was the driver talking?
Well, I didn't exactly. I mean, the whole thing was kind of a memory, that's all. 2 voices up there. But he must have stopped to pick up another hitchhiker, don't you think? Sure, that must have been it. That must have been.
It won't work, son. Who was it told us Tommy Tucker wouldn't carry riders up front? Said he was so conscientious about the rules he wouldn't take a hitchhiker up there.
Oh, well, I did, but... Well, I might have been wrong about that. Maybe he just didn't want me to ride up there, you know.
Kid, don't make it any worse.
Well, Mr. Valentine, I suppose Tucker might have picked somebody up, but I can't believe it.
What about a man riding in the back of the truck, Mr. Jeston?
Oh, he thought the boy was hurt, and there's no way the load could be bothered. I wouldn't blame a driver for that.
He wouldn't have given his mother-in-law a ride to her own funeral.
What's that?
No, it's a fact. Evans is my name, wholesale plumbing. Just been waiting for a chance to help you guys.
Yeah, well, look, salesman.
Timid Tommy Tucker, that was my name for him. Oh, a real sweet boy, don't misunderstand me, but... he swallowed the rule book. You know what I mean? Afraid of the powers that be.
Now, look, friend.
Wait a minute, George. Go on, Mr. Evans.
Pleasure, miss. South of King City about a month ago, I ran out of gas and tried to flag a hitch. Along came Tommy, but do you think he'd pick me up? No, not on your 10 type. And that's me, mind you. Travel the same route all the time. A friend, practically,
Yeah,
you know?
I think we get the idea. Thanks.
Another funny thing that happened was...
Thanks, mister, thanks. No, I doubt if Tommy did pick up a second hitchhiker, or that he was carrying anyone in front, Mr. Valentine, or maybe even in the back.
Well, at least some of Floyd Bronson's story isn't true.
How do you know? How do you know a person's guilty until they've been proven so? How do you?
Wanda, come over here, will you? Excuse us.
All right, sir. But how
now,
do you...
listen to me. I don't get mad at a case just because I don't like the way somebody parts his hair. But that boyfriend of yours can't even look me in the eye.
But it's only a habit, Mr. Valentine.
Is it? You've been standing around watching everything, scared to death Floyd would get himself in deeper and deeper.
It's just that... Oh, well, I knew he'd act that way. Not really stand up for himself right.
How did you know, Wanda?
Well, even yesterday he told me things that weren't true.
What things?
Oh, just little things. About jobs he'd had and was going to get. Important people he knew. Places he'd been.
Sure. Little boy with a big line. Oh, kid, what you see in a guy like that is beyond me.
Mr. Valentine, he doesn't mean to tell things. And gosh, nobody can be perfect. Only I don't even think Floyd Bronson's his name.
Holy sister, why didn't you say...
Oh, I'm so tired. Now, I'm not sure, but... Well, he gave me an address I could write to him later on. He wrote it on an old envelope. Only... Well, there was a place where he'd scratched a name out, and it was sort of like his. It was Mickey Floyd.
Mickey Floyd, huh? Here. Give me some change for the phone. Long distance.
The phone's across the highway at the motel. But Mr. Valentine...
Oh, now, relax. Come on, get some change. Yeah. So that's the story, huh? Okay, Lieutenant Riley, thanks. Sure, I got it.
Well, George, what'd they say in the city?
Same thing they'll say in the country as soon as McGee's fingerprint report comes through.
George, what are you talking about?
Mickey Floyd, alias Floyd Bronson, escaped from a reform school up in Idaho last week.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's our boy, Angel.
Oh, what are you going to tell Wanda?
The truth? She'll just have to get over it.
Well, George, at least it explains the way Floyd's been acting. He was just trying to hide who he is.
Think again. Which would you rather have happen? Be caught and sent back to reform school, or let yourself be thrown in jail for murder? Nell, Brooksy, there's something else. Hey, come on.
What's that?
What the... Hey, Evans. Evans, what's happened?
Oh, brother, I don't know. Somebody said the kid broke up.
Huh?
Patrol car came to pick him up, but they found the cabin open and the guard knocked out. Yeah, sure, listen to that. He must have headed up through the woods. Come on.
No, we'll meet you. Go ahead. Brooksy, if he's running up there, there's nothing we can do. But if Floyd's really got a bad ankle, then he'd more likely head down the other way, wouldn't he? To make a getaway?
What do you mean, George?
I mean, I ought to have my head examined. I left the keys of my car back in the highway. So long, Angel.
Get away from me, Mr. Valentine. Look out.
Oh, no, you don't. Move over, will you?
No.
I said move over. I'm driving this buggy.
I wasn't going to steal your car.
Oh, no, just borrow it.
Say, whose car is that? That sedan?
How should I know?
Well, what are you doing?
I just wanted time to tell you how crazy you are, Buster. Out of the frying pan into the fire. Run. That's all you think of. Okay, well, for my money, you're guilty.
But I'm not. I didn't kill anybody.
Yeah, you said that. Now, come on, describe the inside of that fur truck for me again.
Huh?
Come on, the back end of the truck.
Oh, well, it was pretty dark and I was sleepy, but, there was a big box that said Silver Fox on it, and I laid down next to a big bolted crate that said Chinchilla. The bolts kept banging me.
You gonna stick with that hogwash?
Hogwash? But it's true. It's what happened.
Why did you slug that guard?
Listen, they're coming after us.
I said, why did you slug that guard just now to get away?
What guard?
Oh, cut it out. The guard that was standing there.
He wasn't there. I didn't see him. I just found the door was open. I knew I had to get away before they put me in jail where I could. Listen, they're closer.
Malarkey, isn't it? It's all malarkey. You not slugging the guard.
But I didn't.
You gonna stick with that stuff?
Mr. Valentine.
With all of it? Are you?
You're liable to start shooting. Drive faster.
Now, you listen to me. Are you gonna stand on your feet for once? Look a cop in the eye and say that stuff and make him believe it because you believe it?
Mr. Valentine, I'm a little guy. I'm all alone. There's nobody that I can... Look out! They're right behind you. What are you doing?
Just take it easy, kid. We're not going to be hurt.
But...
Yeah, that's right. I said we. Because I'm right here with you, Floyd. And I believe you. Everything you've said.
Valentine, what in the name of blue blazes?
Obstructing justice, yeah, I know. But now, wait a minute, McGee. You just heard the boy here describe the inside of the truck, didn't you?
I'll say this, McGee. It was quite an accurate description.
Thanks, Justin. And how could he have known what it looked like unless the driver did let him in there? He wouldn't have known how to work the lock on the outside. And if Floyd was riding it back, how could he have got up front again to attack the driver?
Well, I know we haven't got all the answers yet. But in the meantime, I can hold him for his breakaway, slugging the guard.
McGee, the kid says he didn't do it.
Oh, now, look.
The thing that's been bothering me, and probably you too, is that there's no other handy explanation for this whole business. Well, maybe I can come up with one.
Don't count on it. You see, I think instead of it all being true, it's all false. Like the boy riding in back. Why, we've turned up a witness who passed the truck on the road and who swears there were two people in front.
Oh, great. But look, if the kid can describe what was in back.
Back, front, will you?
Okay. But, McGee, just suppose there's somebody who's scared to death of Floyd. Because, well, by sheer accident, Floyd was along and asleep when a crime was committed.
What do you mean?
And there are things in Floyd's memory, like he recognized somebody's sedan over here. Well, I remember he was driven off the highway by a sedan. That's when he hurt his ankle. Now, suppose it was a sedan that shouldn't have been seen in that neck of the woods last night.
Go on, Valentine. The guard comes next, doesn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, if there was someone who was terrified of Floyd's possible evidence, and at the same time knew the kid was a perfect fall guy, wouldn't it be logical to set up a chance for Floyd to escape? The crazy kid would be bound to keep running until he'd be stopped someplace by a bullet. And then there'd never be any question of an alternate explanation. No more dangerous investigation.
Well, there are lots of holes in a story like that.
I'm afraid so, Mr. Valentine.
And if my theory is right, Mr. Justin, then even the business of front and back fits into place. The kid said he was asleep in back and heard voices. Okay, McGee. You got a witness says there was somebody up front.
Well, yes, it's true that checks, but...
Only how could there be another hitchhiker in the cab when the driver was so conscientious about no riders?
No, I'm sure he wouldn't have picked
There's
up.
only one person in the world I can figure would benefit by a carload of valuable furs being burned to a crisp. A person who would naturally have to kill the conscientious driver to manage it.
Wait a minute. Are you
And
trying
it's the only person that a driver who lived by the rules could pick up on the highway. The guy who owned the furs. The guy who wrote the rules, Mr. Justin. You.
Insurance, Mr. Valentine? Well, I don't understand.
Yeah, sure, Wanda. Insurance on the furs. Why, there was even chinchilla in that load. Maybe some of them weren't even the real thing to begin with.
And the insurance company would never know. Justin would just hold out his hand to get a nice fat check, which apparently he needed to keep his company going.
And it was Mr. Justin who met the truck out there on 41.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Probably pretended he had a flat tire or something.
Only poor Tommy Tucker. It's all going to be made to look like an accident, wasn't it?
That's right, and it would have, if it hadn't been for your stumbling Romeo wandering into it. The police found enough evidence to make Justin confess. Oh, hey, give me a nickel, will you, Angel? Here, have some music, Wanda, because this is where we came in. See you later.
George? What on earth... Oh, excuse me.
Hello. Mr. McGee said I could come in for a few minutes and, well, anyway...
Before you go back to school, huh?
Yeah.
Well, Mudface is in there, Floyd.
Huh?
Oh, she's a nice enough kid, I guess. Not very attractive, but... Well, maybe if you get a chance to travel around again, you'll meet somebody.
Now, wait a minute. Who said she's not attractive? What do you mean, mudface? Look, Mr. Valentine, I've stood an awful lot of criticism for you, but when it comes to Wanda...
Hey, cool off. Go on, kid, get in there.
Oh, George. I wonder if he'll ever really grow up, straighten himself out.
Brooksy, I think he's already started.
You can easily keep the outside of your car from rusting, but how are you going to protect internal engine parts when rust is responsible for 80% of the wear? That's the rust caused by acid-laden moisture. This moisture settles on cylinder walls and other vital parts the moment you turn off the ignition. The one sure way to prevent it is to use RPM motor oil. For RPM is compounded to keep a moisture-proof film on all parts at all times. Even though your car stood idle for days or weeks, that acid-laden moisture could not reach internal parts. Not with RPM on the job. No wonder this motor oil is first choice in the West. It's the oil that stops 80% of engine wear. Rely on RPM to add years to the life of your car and to keep repair bills at a minimum. Ask for it at independent Chevron gas stations and at standard stations where they say and mean we take better care of your car. Tonight's adventure of George Valentine has been brought to you by Standard of California on behalf of independent Chevron gas stations and standard stations throughout the West. Robert Bailey is starred as George with Francis Robinson as Brooksy. Let George Do It is written by David Victor and Jackson Gillis and directed by Don Clark. Also heard in the cast were Virginia Eiler as Wanda, Bill Conrad as Evans, Walter Burke as Floyd, Ted DeCorsia as Justin, and Joe Duvall as McGee. The music is composed and presented by Eddie Dunstetter. Your announcer, John Heaston. Listen again next week, same time, same station, to Let George Do It. This is the Mutual Don Lee Broadcasting System.
Welcome back. Well, it is challenging trying to help someone when they can't or won't tell you the truth. This episode continued to emphasize Brooksy's role in this detective partnership. With at one point, George tried to shush somebody, and Brooksy told them to continue, which is not the usual practice, but I liked it here. It worked, even though I don't think the guy had much to contribute of value, other than perhaps giving him the depths of the driver's conscientiousness. Well, now we turn to listener comments. Hard to choose just one. They are all great. Right now, it's Johnny Dollar or Let George Do It. That could be because they've been on from the start, so they are kind of like a comfy pair of shoes. Okay, we'll split the vote half and half, and we also got another vote for Let George Do It. Also, I wanted just to say thank you to Sean and Eleonora for becoming our latest premium subscribers with $10 tips to support the program. Any tip over $7 gives you access to our premium site, which includes all of the extras that we put out for download on both the Great Detectives and the Dragnet apps. So thanks so much. Appreciate the support. We'll be back tomorrow with Sherlock Holmes. Well, before we get into today's episode of Sherlock Holmes, I do want to let you know about Netflix. The selection of instant watch shows available on Netflix continues to grow. The entirety of the TV series Have Gun Will Travel, Mission Impossible, The Twilight Zone, and Alfred Hitchcock Presents are just some of the series that have become available with hundreds of episodes. If you're into classic television and films, or if you just want to be able to choose the shows you watch and what you'd like to see, Netflix offers a great value. For those of you in the U.S., go to netflix.greatdetectives.net. And for those of you in Canada, go to netflixca.greatdetectives.net. Well, let's go ahead and we will take a listen to today's episode of Sherlock Holmes, The Horseless Carriage.
Kreml Hair Tonic and Kreml Shampoo present the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes, starring Nigel Bruce as Dr. Watson and Tom Conway as Sherlock Holmes. Now let's drop in again on Sherlock Holmes' famous colleague, Dr. Watson. Good evening, Dr. Watson.
Good evening, Mr. Bell. I was watching from the window as you drove up. Do my eyes deceive me, or haven't you a brand new car?
I'm glad to say I have, Dr. Watson. You want to come out for a spin?
No, thank you. Some other time, perhaps. Can't help thinking of the first time I ever accepted such an invitation.
I sent a story, Dr. Watson, and judging from the reminiscent expression, one in which you and your friend Mr. Sherlock Holmes were both concerned.
Oh, hardly, Doctor. You're quite right, my boy. Sherlock Holmes and I took our first ride in a motor car together back in the autumn of 1903. When Holmes had just concluded the affair of the creeping man.
I refuse to listen to any more hints, Dr. Watson, unless you're going to tell us the whole story.
Oh, of course, Mr. Bell. As soon as you've had your word with our listeners, I'll relate the strange account which I've entered in my case book as the adventure of the Horseless Carriage.
Men, if you want to be a success in life, remember that well-groomed hair means a lot to a man's appearance. I've heard so many men complain lately that the hairdressing they use is too greasy or too highly perfumed. That's why I urge you to try Kreml Hair Tonic. This highly specialized hair tonic has just enough light oil to keep hair handsomely groomed, every lock in place, with a rich, healthy-looking luster. Yet Kreml never leaves the hair looking or feeling greasy or sticky. This is because Kreml contains a special combination of hair grooming ingredients which is found in no other hair tonic. After you apply Kreml, just run your hand over your hair. Notice how delightfully clean your hair feels. So tempting for the ladies to touch. Notice how no greasy film comes off on your hand or hat band. Kreml always gives hair such a handsome, clean-cut look, as if you just combed it. And it keeps it that way all day long. Kreml, Kreml Hair Tonic. Now, Dr. Watson, you have my undivided attention. How about the adventure of the Horseless Carriage?
It all began one morning when Holmes and I were breakfasting in our rooms in Baker Street. Holmes was opening his mail.
If you can tear yourself away from the kidneys and bacon for a moment, Watson, I'd like to read you a letter.
It's a bad habit, Holmes, burdening your mind with problems at breakfast. It appears a suggestion, told you so 100 times, but go ahead.
My dear Mr. Holmes, my friend Mr. Alexander Holder of the banking firm of Holder and Stevenson of Threadneedle Street informs me that you recently were of great assistance to him in a highly confidential matter.
Oh, what's the matter?
I'm therefore taking the liberty of calling upon you at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, Tuesday, in the hope of obtaining your assistance and advice. Yours faithfully, Austin Grierson.
Austin Grierson? Seems to me I've heard or read about that name somewhere later. That's more to you.
Thank you, no. Take a look at his letter and see if you can form any conclusion from it, while I have a glance at what our reference books can offer on Mr. Grierson.
Mailed yesterday. Postmarked Southampton. Mr. Grierson is presumably well-to-do. The notepaper is expensive quality.
Capital, Watson. What else?
Nothing else, I can see.
My dear Watson, nothing else that you observe, you mean? Mr. Grierson has evidently written under the stress of strong emotion. Notice how the pen nib has dug into the paper at several points. He is evidently a man who is used to having his own way. The manner in which he appoints the hour at which he will call upon us today indicates that. He is obviously mechanically minded, and despite his wealth, still interests himself in machinery.
Oh, now, Holmes, how can you tell that?
There are faint traces of 2 fingerprints of the writer's left hand, where he held the paper with fingers that were a trifle oily. And your nostrils should enable you to identify the very faint odor of machine oil.
No, not my nostrils.
The light is better over here near the window. Let's see what our reference book says.
Well?
Austin Grierson, Chairman, Board of Directors, Southampton Machine Works, patentee of Grierson's internal combustion engine for motor cars.
Ah, that's where I saw his name in a newspaper account concerning a race of some of these idiotic new horseless carriages.
Quite so. And furthermore, Watson, I can tell you that Mr. Grierson is fond of animals, and especially a large Airedale.
Now, Holmes, I absolutely refuse to believe that you can deduce that from the fellow's letter.
I never said I could. But it's precisely 10 o'clock, and Mr. Grierson, complete with Airedale, has just been ushered in our front door by Mrs. Hudson.
Amazing deduction, I must say. You saw it out of the blasted window.
Come in. Good morning, Mr. Grierson.
Morning, gentlemen.
I'm Sherlock Holmes, and this is my colleague, Dr. Watson.
How do you do? How do you do, sir?
How do you do, sir? Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, I'm glad to meet you. Quiet, Jeff, quiet there. This is my colleague and a very good guardian, too.
Sit down, Mr. Grierson, and tell me why you feel the need of a watchdog. The newness of his collar and lead would indicate that you've only recently acquired him.
Quite right, Mr. Holmes. Well, I'll get to the point at once. I made all my money in machinery. I don't mind saying it, I'm a pretty wealthy man. During the past 3 years, I've devoted all my time and most of my fortune to developing the coming wonder of the world, sir, the motor car.
Wonder of the world, eh? You can never replace the horse, Mr. Grierson. Never.
You sound like my nephew Edward, Dr. Watson. He shares your opinion. But I assure you, sir, that if my new motor car can only win the forthcoming endurance test, which you may have read, I shall have no difficulty in selling a car a week.
52 cars a year? Preposterous.
Nevertheless, it is the case, Dr. Watson. In fact, Mr. Holmes, it is the very excellence of my prospects that has brought me to you.
How's that, Mr. Grierson?
I have just recently completed and been testing the first model of my new car. 2 cylinders instead of the old-fashioned 1. Tremendous power, Mr. Holmes. The endurance test is to be held tomorrow over a course from Southampton to Alton and back. A distance of over 40 miles.
40 miles?
And I feel certain that my new car will win. And as you can easily imagine, gentlemen, the ensuing publicity will be invaluable. In fact, Mr. Holmes, I have no hesitation in saying that I must win.
I see.
At least one of the backers of the other 3 cars that entered in this contest feels the same way. And the last 2 weeks there have been one very definite attempt to damage my new car, and yesterday a second attempt almost resulted in my death.
Evidently, some people do take these horseless carriages seriously.
Yes, Dr. Watson. Unlike you and my nephew Edward, who feels that I'm dissipating the family fortunes in a mad scheme, some people do. Only the fortunate fact that I was driving slowly at the moment saved me from death when the testing apparatus broke.
It could not have been an accident, Mr. Grierson? Did the mechanism show definite signs of being tampered with?
Beyond any doubt, Mr. Holmes. There were file marks on the steering yoke.
And you are certain that these attempts are being made by outside sources, not by members of your own family or persons associated with your venture?
My family and fellow workers are above suspicion, Mr. Holmes. So I hope that you will undertake to guard both the car and myself during the next 24 hours until the race is over.
Under one condition, Mr. Grierson.
Name it, sir.
I'm always anxious to experience a new sensation. My condition is that you take Dr. Watson and myself for a drive in your racer as soon as we can get to Southampton.
What?
Done, Mr. Holmes.
Not I. You'll never get me to risk my life in one of those wretched things.
How fast are we going?
Better than 16 miles an hour.
Well, the dust's enough to choke you. Oh, thank heavens. That's better.
Have to slow down. Wouldn't do to frighten that farmer's horse to be passing.
Whoa, Beth. Whoa, steady, girl. Confound your stinking motor car.
Useful vehicle if you have to slow down almost to a standstill every time you see a horse.
Don't worry, Doctor. The horse will get used to it.
Not if they show horse sense. How do you like that, Holmes?
Appalling, my dear Watson.
Gentlemen, here we are, safely home again.
A most interesting experience, Mr. Grierson.
Oh, phew. I'll feel better when I've washed off some of this dust.
Got to the house in a moment, Dr. Watson. I'm so sorry there's no place to wash up down here in the barn. I've been keeping the car here for the past couple of weeks instead of down at the machine works. At least this old barn is near the house. I wonder where that fellow Simmons can be.
Just a moment, gentlemen. I'll hang up your dusters in this cupboard.
Here, now, get away from that car, you two. If you don't, your skulls will be bashed in with this spanner.
Just a moment, my good man. There's no need for you to be offended.
I know who you are. You're someone of those
hold
sneaky
on,
people.
Simmons, hold on. These gentlemen are friends of mine. This is Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson.
Oh.
This is Joe Simmons, gentlemen.
How are you, Simmons?
The foreman of my machine works and the best motor car mechanic in the world.
You'll understand my suspicions, Mr. Grierson, when I tell you that Mr. Charles saw some bloke hanging about here while you were up in London.
What, did you catch him?
No, I'm sorry to say I didn't, sir. We chased him, but the blighter got away. Hello, Uncle Austin. How did she run?
Perfectly, Charles, perfectly. You and Joe have a tune to a hair. Gentlemen, my nephew, Charles Grierson, who helped me design my car. Charles, Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson.
How do you do?
How do you do?
She's a beauty, isn't she, gentlemen?
Come, let's go up to the house for some tea. Simmons, you will be here on guard tonight?
You bet I will, Mr. Grierson.
And keep Jeff with you. Stay here, Jeff. Dog.
It was rotten luck, that fellow getting away, Uncle. I was gaining on him till I climbed the fence near the road, and then I gave my ankle a twist that ended all hope of catching him.
Oh, too bad, Charles.
Tell me, Mr. Grierson, have you or your nephew any suspicions that might indicate which one of your competitors is behind these attempts?
No, not a thing.
I wish we had, Mr. Holmes.
Have you taken any precautions?
We've rigged an alarm bell from the barn to the house. Simmons has only to touch a lever, and the gong will ring in the main hall.
What of Simmons himself? There's such a thing as bribery, you know.
I'd stake my life on Joe's honesty. He's been with me 20 years.
Now that I've washed the dust off the outside, I'm glad to see that you gentlemen have something that'll do the job internally.
Yes. You are, Doctor.
Oh, thank you.
Hello, Uncle Austin.
Good evening.
Oh, Helen, my dear. This is Mr. Holmes and Dr. Watson. My ward, Miss Helen Lacey, and her fiancé, my other nephew, Edward Grierson.
How do you do?
I'm glad to see you gentlemen survived your ride in my uncle's infernal contrivance.
To my surprise, we did. I gather that you agree with my low opinion of the Horseless Carriage.
I've told my uncle often enough that I regard it in the same light as the South Sea bubble.
Oh, now, Edward, don't get started on that again.
Just you wait until we won the race and are turning out cars by the dozen, Edward, and you'll find yourself with plenty of legal work on your hands.
Taking care of damage suits, probably.
By the way, I ran across a rather odd thing today in a letter of inquiry from America. Did you know that in all countries except England, people drive on the wrong side of the road?
What? Do you mean to say that in other countries they don't keep to the left?
Absolutely not. They drive on the right.
Barbaric.
Mr. Holmes and Dr. Watson are going to be staying with us, Helen, until... The alarm. Good Scott! Simmons, the car!
Something's happened.
Hurry!
Simmons! Let us in.
You all right?
I'm all right. Why did you ring the alarm?
Well, look at that, Mr. Holmes.
Jeff!
Right. The dog.
He's dead.
Of all the rotten things.
And from the rigor of the limbs, I have no doubt he was poisoned.
No question of it, Holmes.
The scoundrel must have been frightened off by the alarm bell before he could tackle Simmons. What do you think, Mr. Holmes?
I think, Mr. Grierson, that Dr. Watson and I will stand guard over the car until race time tomorrow. I wouldn't like to see Jeff's fate visited upon a human being. Good luck, Mr. Grierson.
You've done your job, Mr. Holmes. Now I'll do mine.
Careful of that curve near Petersfield, Uncle.
Be careful, Uncle.
Good luck. Come back all in one piece.
Car number 4, go! What's the time, Helen?
1 hour and 46 minutes.
With luck, the first car should be finishing soon, shouldn't it?
You're overlooking the time necessary for changing tires, Mr. Holmes. After all, covering better than 40 miles at top speed, they have to make 2 or 3 changes.
Yes, I never heard of having to change a horse's shoes 2 or 3 times in 40 miles, did you?
Oh, quiet, Watson.
The day will come, Dr. Watson, when you'll see tires that will go as much as 500 miles without requiring replacement.
Don't mind him, Dr. Watson. He has the same delusions as my uncle of the future of these dreadful machines.
There he comes! There he goes!
What color's the car, Edward? Can you see?
So much dust I
just make out of bread.
The Grierson's red.
It's your uncle.
Hey, Joe, yes, so it is.
We've won! We've won!
I told you we'd win. Well, come on. Let's be the first to congratulate Uncle.
Well, Holmes, our little job is finished now.
I hope so, Watson. I hope so.
Well, I'll admit the way Mr. Grierson took the bridge outside Alton, my heart was in my mouth. But it was a great race.
Hello, everybody.
Hello,
Hello,
Charles.
Charles.
Where's Mr. Grierson, Charles?
Oh, I left him down in the barn. He's crooning over the car like a mother.
You don't think, Mr. Holmes, that the twisters who've been causing this trouble would try any tricks now that the race is over, do you, sir?
I hardly think anyone will make any attempts on the car.
Oh, here's a telegram for you, Mr. Holmes. It just arrived.
Thank you.
Is Uncle Austin still down at the barn? Just passed by there. Thought I heard a motor running.
Uncle's promised to let me drive the next race.
I'm glad it's you and not Edward who likes motors.
I say, Holmes, where are you going?
Down to the barn.
You don't think that there's anything wrong, do you?
I told you, Watson, I was no longer concerned about the car. Give me a hand with this door, Watson. Seems to be stuck.
Here, let me get my shoulder against it.
Now.
Push.
Back, Watson, back.
What is it, Holmes?
What's wrong?
What's the matter?
Don't go in there. That motor's still running. Those fumes are deadly carbon monoxide. Edward, take Helen back to the house.
No, Holmes, don't.
I've got to get Grierson out.
All right, I'll help you.
No, you don't, Dr. Watson. If you go in, there'll be 3 of you to drag out.
Here. Give me a hand. That's better. Take care of him, Watson.
It's no use going on with that artificial respiration, Charles. I'm afraid there's nothing further that we can do for your uncle.
Will you get in touch with the police, Charles?
I'll send someone to town right away.
I'd best get down to the factory and tell them what's happened. There'll be no party over the victory tonight.
There's another devilish thing that you can charge up to the motor car, Holmes. Grierson evidently stayed in the closed barn with the motor running, was overcome by the deadly fumes, fell, and died of suffocation.
And how do you account for that deep wound at the back of his head?
Well, obviously, when he fell, he struck his head against the metal bonnet of the car. You saw the blood on the edge of the bonnet, didn't you?
Quite so. And I also noticed that Grierson's face is extremely pale. Did you notice that, Watson?
Yes, of course. What of it?
Simply that carbon monoxide victims invariably show a cherry-red discoloration of the face.
What do you mean, Holmes?
This is no accident, Watson. This is murder.
just a moment, we'll rejoin Sherlock Holmes as he endeavors to solve the mysterious death of Austin Grierson. Every man who takes pride in his appearance should know that handsome, healthy-looking hair needs a hygienic scalp. That's why when you buy a hair tonic, be sure to get your money's worth. Don't just settle for any hair dressing when you can enjoy the extra advantages of Kreml hair tonic. This highly specialized hair tonic contains an amazing combination of hair grooming ingredients which is found in no other hair tonic. Kreml keeps dry, stubborn hair neatly in place all day and always gives hair such a natural, well-groomed appearance, never sticky or greasy. But men, Kreml does lots more than keep hair looking handsome. Kreml leaves your scalp feeling so alive. At the same time, it removes dandruff flakes. It's simply great to lubricate a dry scalp. And if your hair is so dry it breaks and falls when you comb it, Kreml actually helps condition the hair, in that it makes it feel softer, more pliable. So men, buy a bottle of Kreml at any drug counter. Ask for an application at your barber shop. Let Kreml help keep your scalp hygienic, your hair always looking its very best. Kreml, Kreml Hair Tonic. Now, Dr. Watson, what happened after Sherlock Holmes discovered Mr. Grierson had not died accidentally but had been murdered?
Well, I was still the only one to whom Holmes had revealed the shocking discovery, and he'd cautioned me to say nothing of it. As we walked back to the house a few minutes later, I suggested a theory.
And on what do you base your suspicions of Edward, Watson?
Well, it's obvious. Grierson told us last night that his two nephews would inherit equally. And Edward has made no secret of the fact that he felt his uncle was throwing away the family fortune in this wild venture. Besides, he had the opportunity. What do you think, Holmes?
I think, Watson, that the libel laws being what they are, and Edward being a lawyer, you had better not air your opinion where he can hear you.
Oh, really?
Ah, Edward. How is Helen?
She's resting upstairs, Mr. Holmes. One of the maids is staying with her. This horrible affair has shaken her badly.
Of course.
I've sent Joe Simmons to town with a message for the police, Mr. Holmes.
Thank you, Charles.
I'm afraid it'll be the better part of an hour before we can expect them.
I wonder, Watson, if you'd be good enough to take care of this little matter that I've noted down on this slip of paper.
Huh? Oh, that's right. I'll see to it at once, Holmes.
Gentlemen, I gathered from what your uncle said last night that you will now be the joint owners of the Southampton Machine Works and of his motor car patent.
Yes.
Do you intend to carry on as before?
Of course not, Mr. Holmes. My uncle knew how I felt about all this expensive foolishness.
I've agreed to buy out Edward's share, and he's going up to London to carry on his legal career.
Well, if you don't need me for anything further, Mr. Holmes, I think I'll sit upstairs and see how Helen is doing.
Of course, Edward. I hope you'll find her bearing up under the shock.
Thank you.
Charles, there are one or two minor points that I'd like to get clear in my own mind before the police arrive.
Anything I can tell you, Mr. Holmes, I'll be glad to.
Now, Charles, when we left you and your uncle, he was about to have you check some question regarding the sparking plugs in the motor. Is that right?
Quite, Mr. Holmes. I opened the bonnet and removed the sparking plugs for Uncle's inspection. Meanwhile, he refilled the petrol tank.
So that there would be sufficient petrol to allow him to test the motor, I assume.
That's right. The tank was almost empty after the race.
Precisely. You didn't help him refill the tank then, did you?
No, I was busy removing the sparking plugs.
And when you were finished?
Uncle told me not to wait for him, that he wanted to run the engine for a few minutes and that I should join you others up here.
And you came straight from the barn to the room in which we all were?
Why, yes.
You stopped nowhere on the way?
Nowhere, Mr. Holmes.
Well, that all seems simple enough.
Yes, I took care of that little matter, Holmes.
Is everything satisfactory?
Quite.
Excellent. If you and Charles will excuse me, Watson, I'll be back in a few minutes.
Why, certainly, Mr. Holmes.
By the way, Charles, Dr. Watson and I will be returning to London as soon as the police have been here.
Very well. I suppose, Dr. Watson, that this tragic accident confirms your distaste for the motor car.
Yes, it does, Charles. Or rather, it would if Holmes hadn't convinced me that it wasn't an accident.
What do you mean?
Something I couldn't. I thought Holmes had told you that...
Told me what?
Nothing. Nothing.
I insist on knowing what you're hinting. Are you implying that my uncle's death was not accidental?
Well, of course it didn't occur to me. But Holmes pointed out that in the case of monoxide poisoning, the face and lips would be congested, and your uncle's face was pale. Holmes seemed to think that
I'll see for myself what Holmes thinks. I won't stand for any insinuations that...
Holmes seemed to think that your uncle was... Oh, gone.
Watson, did he take the bait?
Swallowed it hook, line, and sinker.
Good work, Watson. You evidently carried out my instructions in a note to perfection.
Yes, I think I convinced him that I left the cat out of the bag quite accidentally. He said he was going off to have it out with you at once.
He must have changed his mind rather suddenly, judging from the way he hurried down the hall and tiptoed out of the front door.
I don't understand.
To prove that Austin Grierson was murdered, Watson, would be a matter of the utmost simplicity. But my certainty that it was Charles who murdered him rests upon so slender a bit of evidence that I'm sure no jury in the world would convict him. It was necessary to make Charles betray himself, and he fell into our trap. His very flight is a confession of guilt. Ah, listen.
That's why you told me to remove those things, sparking plugs, you call them, from the car.
Quite. So that Charles would be forced to make his escape on one of the horses, once he'd discovered that the car would not start.
But Holmes, undoubtedly he'll have taken the fastest horse. How on earth are we going to catch up with him?
In the motor car, of course.
The motor car, but Simmons isn't here. Who on earth's going to drive the infernal thing?
I observed Mr. Grierson's actions rather closely yesterday. I feel quite certain that I am competent to operate the machine.
Oh, this is the end.
Come on, Watson. Show me where you hid those sparking plugs.
Slow down. It's so dark I can barely see the road.
Keep your eyes open, Watson. We should be overtaking him any moment. And keep your service revolver ready.
Hello, there's something up ahead there. Just caught a glimpse of it against the skyline.
There he is. Brace yourself, Watson. I'm going to cut in ahead of him. Stop or we fire. Good shot, Watson. You killed me, you devil. Take a look at him, Watson.
Got him through the shoulder. Painful, but not fatal.
Blast you, Holmes. You had the devil's own luck. I can assure you it wasn't luck that gave you away and revealed your whole scheme. You thought that once your uncle was out of the way and you had bought out your brother's interest, you would have sole control of a business that would prove a gold mine. You can't prove it.
A gold mine? Why, Edward told me that Mr. Grierson had sunk a fortune into his experiment.
So he had. But what Edward did not know, but Charles had evidently learned, was that the banking firm of Holden Stevenson had offered Mr. Grierson £100,000 for his patents. The offer was dependent upon his winning the race. The telegram I received yesterday from Holden Stevenson was an answer to my inquiry. You devil.
Good heavens, then, Holmes, all those previous attempts at sabotage...
Those were designed to make us think that some competitor was responsible. All meant to point away from the real murderer.
The dog. Why poison the dog?
Another attempt to lead us off the track by making us believe strangers were responsible.
But, Holmes, what was it that made you realize that it was Charles who killed his uncle?
As I've often told you, Watson, you see, but you do not observe. You may remember that when we returned from our drive, Mr. Austin Grierson, when you wanted to wash off the dust, told you that there was no place in the barn where you could do so.
What on earth's that got to do with it?
When this fellow here had removed the sparking plugs after the race at his uncle's request, his hands must have been covered with dirt and grease. But when he joined us at the house, his hands were quite clean. He told me when I questioned him that he had not stopped anywhere on the way. Obviously, it must have been he that filled the petrol tank so that the engine would keep running after he had killed his uncle. Nothing but petrol would have washed off the oil and dirt from his hands.
Good heavens, Holmes, and that was the slender clue which told you that he'd killed Grierson.
So slender a clue, Watson, that it was only your excellent performance that betrayed this fellow into the flight that will convict him.
Oh, thanks very much. Only did what you told me, Holmes.
In just a moment, Dr. Watson will be back to tell us about next week's story. Ladies, of course you use a shampoo to wash your hair. But just a word of caution. There are many popular shampoos today which leave the hair lustrous but have a tendency to dry the hair. And here's why I advise you to always use Kreml. Lovely Powers models were among the first to discover the amazing beautifying qualities of Kreml shampoo.
Yes, Mr. Bell. The girls claim no other shampoo leaves hair with more brilliant, glossy, natural highlights. Yet, under no circumstances does Kreml shampoo ever dry your hair.
Kreml shampoo is not a soapless shampoo. It's not a cream shampoo. It's entirely different.
It really is different, Mr. Bell. After a Kreml shampoo, the hair actually radiates natural, brilliant luster. But Kreml shampoo has a built-in oil base, which helps keep the hair from becoming dry or brittle.
So, ladies, be smart. Always wash your hair with Kreml shampoo. It leaves hair a vision of shining beauty, yet in no way hurts the texture. Kreml, Kreml shampoo. Now, Dr. Watson, what about next week?
Well, now, let me see. Next week, I think I'll tell you a story I always referred to as Q for murder.
Q for murder? That sounds as if it concerned the theater, Dr. Watson.
That's where you're wrong, Mr. Bell.
Oh?
This adventure took place in the depth of Limehouse near the docks and concerned a particularly unpleasant and fiendish murderer.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure was suggested by an incident in Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's story, The Beryl Coronet. Nigel Bruce appeared by permission of California Pictures. Tom Conway through the courtesy of Eagle Lion Pictures. The Sherlock Holmes series is produced by Tom McKnight, with original music composed and conducted by Alex Steinert. This is Joseph Bell speaking for Kreml Hair Tonic and Kreml Shampoo, and inviting you to be with us next week at this same time, when Dr. Watson will tell us about Q for murder. This is ABC, the American Broadcasting Company.
Welcome back. This is one of those cases that's really amusing today as we take a look at reaction to the car. They were going at 16 miles an hour, and everybody is getting nervous and scared, and that's actually a pretty small speed limit now. So amazing to see how attitudes change. And here we get the first case, well, at least from a fictional story, of carbon monoxide killing with the automobile. Well, we turn to listener comments and feedback now. Richard Davis brings up the point about Joseph Bell that I mentioned on last week's program, but his comment was left a few days before that showed up. And he says, isn't this a happy coincidence or a sly pseudonym for an actor who for some reason could not be identified on the show? I actually went ahead and checked into this because I think that I may have beat around the bush a bit, but it was not actually a pseudonym at all. Joseph Bell, after Sherlock Holmes, made several appearances on the Lux Radio Theater, X-1, and on Cavalcade of America. So as far as I can tell, it was a genuine name and just a happy coincidence. And then we have an email from Amanda and said, I noticed Anthony Boucher listed as writer on some radio shows, in particular Sherlock Holmes. I've read Mysteries by Mr. Boucher, so I looked them up on Google to see the connection. Here's one of the links I found and thought you'd be interested because it speaks of his love for Sherlock Holmes. Indeed, Mr. Boucher, the article talks about Mr. Boucher's very long, varied career within the mystery, fantasy, and science fiction markets, and a legendary career as a critic for which he was awarded an Edgar Award. Really fascinating guy. Got a lot done in life. And all that without a computer. Then again, maybe the absence of the computer allowed him to get all this done. But he wrote several different mystery novels and series. Really just a great editor and critic. So it's massive information. I'll include it in our show notes at greatdetectives.net so you can go over and read it at your leisure. It's at mysterynet.com. And written by somebody who had a little bit of first-hand knowledge of Boucher and was definitely influenced by Boucher's work. So thanks so much for that article. It's much appreciated. Well, that'll do it for now. We'll be back tomorrow with yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Well, before we do get started, I do want to encourage you. Remember, as you make your summer travel plans, remember the name JohnnyDollarAir.com. JohnnyDollarAir.com is the only address you can go to and help support great old-time radio with your purchase. It's powered by Priceline, so you can either name your own price or choose from a lot of great published deals on hotels, rental cars, airline tickets, and even more. Remember, JohnnyDollarAir.com. Well, we have skipped ahead a little bit as a result of lost episodes. We missed the Marie Meadows and the Jane Doe matter. Now that we're up to the episode, the Lillis Bond matter. However, for both this episode and the next one, we only have the rehearsal recordings. And I should let you know, this is going to be a rough rehearsal. We heard several months back a couple of rehearsals for yours truly, Johnny Dollar. These were pretty smooth. It was just like the normal episode, except it was missing the music, and O'Brien stumbled over a couple of lines. Well, this one's going to have an out-and-out blooper. It's nothing dirty or anything, but it is a very rare old-time radio blooper. Be prepared for it, and I hope you enjoy it. And we'll be back after the show. It's the rehearsal for the Lillis Bond matter. You're on the Great Detectives of Old-Time Radio.
From Hollywood, it's time now for Edmund O'Brien as
Johnny Dollar.
You're the man who was sent here by the bonding company, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. Who's this?
My name is Shade, Pat Shade. I'm a private detective working on the case for the bank.
Fine. I didn't know they'd hired one, too.
They call me every once in a while, tracing phonies mostly.
Is there any chance that you know the missing messenger?
Yeah, I know, Lillis. I had him tagged as a clean, honest kid. I still have.
What do you think happened then?
I'm afraid he was either snatched or killed, or both. But that's just my opinion. I wondered if you'd like to get together and compare notes.
I don't have any notes yet, but I'll be glad to pick up your brain.
Pick up your what?
I don't have any notes yet, but I'll be glad to pick your brain. Any place you say.
Edmund O'Brien, in another adventure of the man with the action-packed expense account. America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
While we're stopped,
Let's go back.
Let's take the whole opening again. And Bob, I have just a little too much voice.
Oh, gee. You mean I'm screaming?
Hollywood.
From Hollywood, it's time now for Edmund O'Brien as
Johnny Dollar.
You're the man who was sent here by the bonding company, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. Who's this?
My name is Shade, Pat Shade. I'm a private detective working on the case for the bank.
Fine. I didn't know they'd hired one, too.
They call me every once in a while, tracing phonies mostly.
Is there any chance that you know the missing messenger?
Yeah, I know, Lillis. I had him tagged as a clean, honest kid, and I still have.
What do you think happened then?
I'm afraid he was either snatched or killed, or both. But that's just my opinion. I wondered if you'd like to get together and compare notes.
I don't have any notes yet, but I'll be glad to pick your brain. Any place you say.
Edmund O'Brien, in another adventure of the man with the action-packed expense account. America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to Homer's Great Northern Bonding and Surety Company, Hartford, Connecticut. The following is an accounting of expenditures during my investigation of the Lillis Bond matter. Expense account item 1, $62.80 airfare and incidentals between Hartford and Chicago. A few phone calls after checking into a hotel bore out the details given me when I was assigned the case. Henry Lillis, the messenger, had left the Golden State Bank at 10:30 a.m. He was carrying $80,000 in cash, and his destination was only a few blocks north on LaSalle Street. He never arrived there. At 5 that evening, in a bar near my hotel, I met the private detective working the case for the bank. Pat Shade was a puffy, florid man with past 50 beginning to show in his watery blue eyes.
I've been in the business for a long time. More years than I like to think. Left the police force and opened my own office in 1931. When Chicago was still the rawest town in the country.
Not exactly overdone right now, is it?
Quieted down a lot. Just as well for me. I'm too old for the rough work I used to do, and I'm getting older. I'll end up holding a sign at a school crossing one of these years. You younger fellas ought to think about it. Ought to get out of the business before it's too late. There's no future in it.
I've heard that said before, but never by anybody who left it for something better.
I wish I'd stayed on the force. I'd be on pension now. You know, Scotty Dyer's old man and I walked a beat together. Scotty's a good cop. What'd he tell you?
Nothing, really. I just phoned to check in with him, and he gave me a free hand. Tell me about this Henry Lillis.
Nothing much to tell. Bright kid, a couple of years out of high school. His father's dead, and he's got a mother to help support.
You think you know him well enough to be sure of the honesty you mentioned on the phone?
Sure? No. I'm not sure of anything anymore. Anything or anybody. But there's nothing in his background to tell you anything else. He had to have a pretty good record to be bonded by this company, you know that.
That's why you think somebody grabbed him, huh?
That's my hunch, yeah, I think so. Do you know anything different?
No, but it strikes me that a snatch would be pretty hard to carry off in a street as is LaSalle at 10:30 in the morning without drawing some attention. Sergeant Dyer tells me none of the people who were near there at the time saw any trouble.
It would depend on how it was done. Now, understand, this is only my hunch. I don't have the case solved yet.
Has anybody talked to his mother, do you know?
I think the cops went out this morning.
I guess it'll be all right for me to go out this evening.
Worrying about his son, she's probably not going to be in very good shape.
Maybe not. But sometimes people who are in bad shape drop a lot of information they wouldn't drop otherwise. Shall we have another round? The Lillis house was a small one in a respectable but not plushy neighborhood. It had been painted recently, and its yard was well tended. I noted these things because they made it appear that, except for widowhood, Mrs. Lillis and her son were a comfortable and average American family. She was an attractive woman of some 40 years who, obviously and with good cause, had been crying.
Please sit down, Mr. Dollar.
Thank you.
Police have already been here. I suppose you know that.
Yes, I knew they'd come.
They didn't say it in so many words, but after they left, I realized they suspect that my son is responsible for this crime, don't they?
They aren't sure of anything yet, Mrs. Lillis.
It's terribly difficult, as a mother, to be fair and honest. If Henry did this thing himself, then at least he may be safe and unharmed, and he may come back and take his punishment. Do you understand?
Of course I do.
Naturally, my first instinct was to defend him against the suspicion. I couldn't believe it was possible that my son was a thief. But then I realized if someone else was responsible, then Henry had been kidnapped and would be in serious danger. So now, Mr. Dollar, I'm praying that my son is guilty. And if he is, I'll do everything I can to see him brought to justice.
I know it's a bad situation for you, but I'll make my part of it as easy as I can. Did your son say or do anything that would have indicated he was planning anything like this? Was he in trouble, or was there anything he wanted to get away from?
No, nothing that I noticed. Henry was forced into manhood quite early. He's been without a father since he was 9. He became quite independent, and he shared very little of his outside life with me. He may have wanted to get away from me, however.
You mean that he didn't like his responsibility?
Yes, he wants me to marry again.
I understood that he wasn't your sole support.
My husband left me a small income from his insurance. I own this house, but Henry's earnings have always helped.
Who are his friends, Mrs. Lillis? I may want to talk to them.
He sees hardly any of the friends he made in school. Most of them went on to college. There's one I know of, Raymond Lockhart. He works in the service station on North Michigan Avenue.
And you don't know who your son spent the rest of his time with?
I'm afraid I don't. Oh, I was very wise. I wasn't going to make the same mistake so many widows do with their sons, with possessiveness and too much prying in the name of protection. I let Henry work out his own life and asked very few questions. I was so wise. If Henry is guilty, I'm to blame for it. And he must be guilty and not dead.
Thanks, Mr. Sprague. Come in again, huh? Oh, I'm sorry. You caught me in a busy night. I read about this thing with Hank Lillis in tonight's paper. First I heard about it. You think he did it?
It's one possibility, Raymond. As a matter of fact, I looked you up to ask you the same question.
You mean, do I think he did it? Well, if it turns out that way, it'll sure be a surprise to me. The paper said they were looking into the idea that somebody could have forced him into a car.
Yeah, every angle is being covered.
Yeah, I've known Hank for a pretty long time.
I'd trust him with my paycheck any day in the week. As far as I know, the only trouble he ever got into was kind of his temper. Got him into a few brawls.
When did you see him last?
Oh, gosh, I don't remember. You see, we used to get out in the town together once every 2 weeks or so, but we haven't for a couple of months. He won't admit it, but I think that he's pretty thick with this girl he's going with.
Oh? I didn't know about that.
Yeah. They stopped in here one night to gas up. It's her car. She's pretty all right. Blonde, but I don't know. She kind of struck me as a dish that's been around quite a bit, if you know what I mean. Sometimes you can tell the way they kind of look at you, you know?
What's her name, do you know?
Well, the more I think of it, if Hank is in trouble, I'll lay you 10 to 1 it is this blonde. What the devil was her name? I talked to him about it. Lily or Lillian, I think. Oh, what was her name?
His mother doesn't know about her, I take it. She didn't mention any girl.
No, this one is not the type to take home to Mother. He said he met her at the bank somewhere.
I can check that then.
Yeah. Be right with you. Right with you. Her father is some kind of a guard there or something.
Guard? A private detective by any chance? Was her last name Shade?
Shade, that's it. Lillian Shade. How could I forget a name like that?
Go ahead. Pour yourself another drink, Shade. I've got an extra bottle in my luggage.
Yeah. Did you tell the police about this?
Not yet.
This will be the end for me if she's mixed up in it.
You know where she is?
Yeah, she told me she was going to spend a couple of days with a friend.
Why don't you check the friend? Maybe your daughter is there.
She didn't mention any names. She never does. She's no good. She's like her mother was. You mind?
Go ahead. Where is her mother?
She ran off with some guy. Lillian was about 5. I shipped her off to my sister in Minneapolis, but I had to take her back when my sister died. She started running wild when she was 13, and I never could stop her.
If they pull this together, it's liable to set child psychology back in the years. The son of a mother who really tried to do the right thing, maybe tried too hard. And the daughter of a guy who didn't try at all. Did you make a point of not mentioning her when we were talking about the Lillis kid earlier?
I was waiting for you to ask that. I didn't know there was anything between them. She met him and she dropped in at the bank one morning. I guess I knew they met like that a few more times, but the rest of it I didn't know anything about.
Did she have a job?
She hasn't worked for a few months. When she does work, it's in some cheap bar, so that's worse.
Was it your car she drove?
No, it was hers.
You know the license number?
No, but that won't be hard to learn.
You're sure it was registered in her name then?
Well, I never noticed the slip. I supposed it was. She said some friend bet some races for her, and she got it with the money she won. I can't see any reason why it wouldn't be in her name.
Yeah.
Dollar.
Huh?
It's damn decent of you to talk to me instead of going to the police.
Instead? I hope you aren't going to ask me not to give this to the police.
Oh, no, of course not. But I was going to ask you to let me tell them. It's going to look mighty bad for me if you go in, you know, with Scotty Dyer in charge of the case and his old man and I on the force together in the old days. I don't want it to look like I was holding back information from him.
Were you?
No, but I won't be able to prove it to you until we find Lillian. She'll tell you I didn't know anything about her and Henry.
All right, Shade. You going in tonight?
Just as soon as I leave here. And you don't have to do this, but I'd appreciate it if you could forget your calling me down here. It'd be better for me if they didn't know you had to tell me about Lillian.
All I'm interested in is getting the money back. Doesn't make any difference what I say or don't say. You go to the police tonight, and we'll play it as it comes after that. Johnny Dollar.
Sergeant Dyer, Dollar.
Oh, yeah, Sergeant. You're on it early this morning. Anything doing?
Henry Lillis just gave himself up.
When? This morning?
Yep. Hitchhiked in from someplace up the lake. Something about a fight with one of the men in the deal. He's messed up some.
What about the money?
They need some medical work before we can get a decent statement from him. Shock, mostly. I put him in the hospital.
Didn't he say anything?
And he kept mumbling something about somebody with a name like Saunders. Go on down. We'll talk to him as soon as we can. I think he'll be ready to tell his part of the story anyway.
I met Sergeant Dyer at 10 that morning. It was after some 15 minutes of conversation had passed by without mention of Pat Shade that I learned he hadn't reported the night before. I brought up the subject myself, and Dyer knew him well enough to automatically reach for the phone and call the bar at my hotel. Shade had stayed there until it closed. 3 more calls to his office, his home, and the bank failed to raise him. But right then, it didn't seem too important to the case, since Henry Lillis was in custody. We got in to see him at 11:30. He was a slight, fair-haired kid, by this time past the feeling of fear. His face was pale and blotched with the disinfectant the doctor had put on some scratches and bruises.
You strong enough to talk now, Lillis?
I guess so.
This man is from the company that bonded you.
You don't look like you had much fun out of that 80 grand, Lillis.
No, I didn't.
Where is the money?
I don't know where it is now, but we took it to a house above Lake Bluff.
Who is we?
I don't care who it hurts now. Lillian Shade.
She was with you then?
She was with me or I was with her. I don't suppose it makes any difference. We were together.
You mentioned hurting somebody. Do you mean her father?
Yeah. He talked to me about her once. He told me she wasn't any good for me. I hated him then for saying that about his own daughter, but I sure wish I'd listened to him. I wish I'd believed him. None of this would have happened if I had.
It did happen, Lillis. We want to know about it. Everything about it.
Well, I don't know exactly how it started. I met her and I was stupid. I'd never known anybody like her before, and it sort of seemed as if we were in the same boat.
What do you mean, the same boat?
Well, neither one of us had all the things we wanted, and it looked like we never would.
If everybody in that boat turned criminal, there wouldn't be enough banks to go around.
I never thought about it before, the way she did, but the longer I went with her, the more I began to. She'd done other things, never anything like this.
What kind of things?
Well, the way she got the money for her car. She met this man and learned some things from him. She did it so that it could never be called blackmail, and she got the money.
Badger game, maybe.
I don't think I know quite what that is.
Go on.
Well, I don't think I have to go through all of it, but, well, one night she kept talking about how I carried large amounts of money all the time, and that we didn't have... I don't think I have to go through all of it. Well, one night she kept talking about how I carried large amounts of money all the time, and that we didn't have any of our own. She said she wouldn't marry me unless we could be rich. So we planned this. She waited down the street in her car 4 days in a row until I knew she was... She waited down the street in her car 4 days in a row until I knew I was making a big transfer.
You knew how much you were carrying?
Not exactly, but... Well, I'd worked there long to know when it was a big amount, you know, according to where it was going and things like that. So yesterday morning I got into the car, and by the time I was due back at the bank, we were out of town.
This house near Lake Bluff where you went, who's it belong to?
Well, she said a friend who was on a trip someplace. She had a key. I think it belonged to the Sanders or Saunders or whoever it was.
How'd he fit in?
I didn't know anything about him until he showed up late last night. Then I found out that Lillian didn't have any idea of going away with me like she'd said. From the beginning, she knew she wasn't. She was just using me, and this man, she'd call him Red, he told me to get out.
How much money was your share?
None of it. Not any of it. But I didn't even care about that. But Lillian had used me. When this Red told me, I went crazy, I guess. There was a fight. That I barely remember. I left the house, but I don't know where I went. When it got light, I on the highway and started hitchhiking. Nobody picked me up because I was all bloody and my clothes were torn. And finally, this man did. He was a minister.
We left him after he gave us the best he could in the way of a description. The only thing Lillis seemed sure of was the route to the house near Lake Bluff. The 3-state alarm was put out on Lillian Shade and the red-headed man in his green club coupe. In less than an hour, the sergeant and I had made our 20-mile trip and were approaching the place on a dirt driveway that stretched some 50 yards of the road.
Hey, hold it. It might not be as empty as it looks. The car on the east side.
I think that might be the girls. Service station attendant described it for me. Means they both left in one car, don't you think?
Well, probably does. Guess with 80,000, one abandoned car wouldn't mean much. think the house is empty, all right. Wouldn't make sense for it not to be. No. Well, it's locked.
Look, through here. Look at the furniture. It's where the fight went on.
Must have been quite a ruckus.
A friend of his, Lillis, packed quite a punch when he got started. Pretty good temper. Yeah, there by the wall. That lamp was thrown. It ought to carry some prints.
Have a look through the rest of it. And I doubt if we'll ever find...
Sergeant Dyer, over here in the kitchen. It's Lillian Shade. She's dead. And so homicide entered the picture and a new alarm was broadcast. Sanders or Saunders in a green club coupe. Wanted on suspicion of grand theft and murder. I had a different idea. I couldn't sell it to Sergeant Dyer, but it was one... I couldn't sell it to Sergeant Dyer, but it was one of those things that I couldn't drop. The police laboratory men started combing through the house, and I went back into the city. It was about 2 p.m, and Pat Shade was in his office.
Now, I can explain if you let me.
Never mind that. You know that Henry Lillis surrendered to the police, don't you?
I didn't handle myself very well last night.
I'm not talking about last night.
I know. What I'm trying to tell you is that I didn't get around until late today, and I just read about it. Where is Lillian?
You know the house she goes to up near Lake Bluff?
No, I never heard her say anything about a house up there. Is that where you found her?
You were pretty drunk last night. Where'd you go?
Yes, I was pretty drunk last night. It's not every day you come to the end of your rope. That's where I got last night after more than 20 years in this filthy business.
Where did you go after you left the hotel bar?
I went home.
What time did you go to bed?
I don't remember.
Do you remember leaving again after you got home?
Where'd I go?
Your daughter was murdered last night.
But... what are you accusing me of, young man?
I'm not accusing you of anything.
I wish I could talk about this later. I don't seem to be thinking very well.
I'm afraid we have to talk about it, Pat.
Yeah. You asked me if I knew about a house near Lake Bluff because you think I might have killed my daughter. That I might have waited until the red-headed man left for some reason and that I went in.
How'd you know about the red-headed man?
Henry Lillis' statement. Part of it was in the paper. Do you think I killed Lillian?
I know that last night you hated your daughter.
Yes, I did. I have nothing to lie for anymore, so I can be truthful. If I had struck Lillian last night, I wouldn't remember. It may be quite possible that I killed her. I don't remember.
I understand you found Pat Shade, Dollar. What do you have to say?
Well, I'm not sure what he said because I don't know if his mind was working well or badly.
Here is the on-the-spot report from the lab men. There's more you can see before we start back.
Thanks. This is almost enough, isn't it?
Wait till you see the rest of it. I have a tough time squeezing out now. Well, shall we go? I hope you don't mind us busting in like this.
Hello, Lillis.
Hello.
We wondered if you could help us on a few details we're confused on.
All right.
Are you sure that the only cars that came up to Lake Bluff were Lillian Shades and this Saunders?
They're the only ones I knew about. Were there more?
That's what's confusing us. Now, this fight, it was in the front room and not in the kitchen, is that right?
Well, it's hard to remember, I think so.
And after And after that, you left, and then you caught a ride into town and gave yourself up.
Yeah.
Why'd you give yourself up, Lillis?
I don't know why. It just seemed like the only thing I could do.
Because maybe you thought if you gave yourself up on a grand theft charge and told a sad story that we'd never think of you in regard to murder.
Murder?
That's a dirt driveway, Lillis. The only car that drove up that driveway was Lillian Shades.
Looks like there wasn't any red-headed man there at all, doesn't it?
Like you messed up that room to make it look like there'd been a fight.
Fingerprint men aren't through.
All right! I didn't mean to kill her. We got out there and we had the money and she got scared. We looked at all of it and she went to pieces. She wanted to take it back and I knew we couldn't. I lost my temper and hit her because I was excited. I thought she was faking, but she wasn't. She wasn't faking. I didn't mean to.
We can go, can't we, Sergeant?
Yeah. I'll come back later for a statement.
Expense account item 2, $183.30, miscellaneous. Item 3, same as item 1, transportation back to Hartford. Expense account total, $308.90. Remarks? In his next statement, Henry Lillis revealed the hiding place where he'd put the stolen money, so the company won't lose. That's more than you can say for the two parents involved, either the deserving or the undeserving. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, stars Edmund O'Brien in the title role and is written by Gil Dowd with music by Wilbur Hatch. Edmund O'Brien can soon be seen in the Paramount Pictures production Warpath. Featured in tonight's cast were Herb Butterfield, Jeanette Nolan, Tony Barrett, Tim Graham, and Gil Stratton, Jr. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, was transcribed in Hollywood by Jaime Del Valle. This is Bob Lamond inviting you to join us next week at this time when Edmund O'Brien returns as
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Welcome back. Well, isn't this a nice thought to end your week on when, at the start of the show, O'Brien flubs a line and craps up a bunch of folks on the set. Now, considering that O'Brien would go on to win an Academy Award, I guess it can make us all feel better about the little mistakes we might make around our workplace. So, as I said in the intro, it was a rough rehearsal. Several actors flubbing and stumbling over their lines. The others were almost, that we've heard so far, were almost perfect in rehearsal. So this was a little bit of a change. But despite the difficulties, this was actually, I thought, a pretty good noirish story. And they did a great job. I think the writers have been improving on working within the limits of the new time limits prescribed by the networks. This is one I would, if somebody finds the actual recording that's not a rehearsal, that I wouldn't mind playing, because I thought this was an exceptionally good piece of hard-boiled radio. All right, now we turn to listener comments. Rich says, my favorites are Sherlock Holmes, Nero, Wolfe, and Johnny Dollar. Okay, I'll go ahead and I'll give, since Box 13 is no longer on, I will give a third of a vote to each. But would rather not subdivide any more votes than I have to. It is hard to make a choice, and particularly for a host, so I appreciate the challenge. Alright, well, we've got a ton of comments and emails that I think would work better with other shows. So I will save them for next week, and we'll look forward to sharing them with you then. In the meanwhile, send your comments to box13@greatdetectives.net. Be sure to cast your vote for the show on Podcast Alley, podcastalley.greatdetectives.net. And follow us over on Twitter at Radio Detectives. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham, signing off.